I want to call to order the June 3rd meeting of the Fish and Wildlife Commission. It's good to see all our commissioners physically present today, so much better than on Zoom to me. And I also want to welcome staff and Deputy Commissioner Clark here with us today. Our Commissioner Rich Storm is sick today. He wanted to make it but was unable to make it, so we're thinking about him today. I also want to welcome the general public. Thank you all for your patience and the technical difficulties we had to start the meeting. We were a little delayed about starting, but our technical issue hopefully has been corrected. We'll have to see how that goes. I want to remind everybody to please silence your phones during our meeting today. And with that being said, I'm going to turn the floor over to Brian Clark, our Deputy Commissioner, for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Paul Horn.
All right, let's pray together. Almighty God, we praise you as the creator of heaven and earth, all things good, and despite many challenges we face, Lord, you give us wisdom, you give us common grace to be able to study together and put our heads together and try to resolve solutions to manage your world. And we thank you for the beauty, for the opportunity, for the privilege of being able to do that here this morning as a token of your stewards of your creation. We ask, Lord, for wisdom for the commission this morning. Thank you for each of them and for them collectively as a body, that they have the responsibility and privilege to represent all of Kentuckians and even our many visitors in making decisions to conserve the fish and wildlife resources of the Commonwealth and also provide opportunities to enjoy them. We just pray again for wisdom for them and for an expeditious meeting. And finally, we pray for all those who are out on the waters or in the woods or fields. We pray for their safety. And as many new people will be participating this weekend in Free Fishing Weekend, we pray for safety and fun for them as well. And we pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
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 Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Please be seated, everyone. Again, I want to welcome you, and since the Commissioner is not here today, the Deputy Commissioner is going to catch us up on a few things, but the Commissioner did tell me last night to remind everyone with the oncoming water season and water sports to be sure and wear your life jacket. To you kayakers out there who oftentimes stuff your life jacket up in the hold area, if that kayak rolls over you, it's going to be difficult to get to. So wear your life jackets when you're out on the water. He also wanted to thank the staff for all the hard work that they have done recently. There's a lot of things going on with Fish and Wildlife, and the Commissioner asked that I thank the staff for all the hard work, and that's everyone from law enforcement and people in the field to our legal staff. So he said be sure and thank everybody for their hard work. He also asked me to remind everyone of the Free Fishing Weekend, June 4th and 5th. I believe Deputy Commissioner Clark is going to reiterate that and talk about it a little bit. But we want we want the Commissioner to get better, and we made him stay at home today because he's got a fever and under the weather. So Commissioner, get to feeling better. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Clark for his comments and updates, and then we'll have roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a couple of quick observations or points to bring out in the interest of brevity, but also because it is Free Fishing Weekend this weekend, June 4th to 5th. Each year, the first full weekend of June, we allow people, residents and non-residents alike, to fish anywhere in Kentucky without a license, without a fishing license or a trout permit, and enjoy the great opportunities we have. I want to encourage all of our audience here, which are primarily going to be very enthusiastic sports people, to take someone fishing this year, and this is a great opportunity to do that. We say test drive a fishing license at no cost, and so we encourage you all to do that. Take someone, take your family members and friends this weekend out on the waters. We'll note that all other fishing regulations apply, so daily catch limits and other regulations are still in effect. And if you're fishing on private land, you still have to have permission from the landowner. Also, we'll mention that there are many events for Free Fishing Weekend, and so we encourage folks to go to the website, our website, fw.ky.gov, and we have information about those events. There are some scattered across the state, and we want to thank our partners, many partners who put those events on. And I thought about naming some of the ones that we know for sure, and many of the commission members are involved in those groups or with those groups and helping to get gifts for the young anglers who are going to be participating in kids events, such as free fishing poles or other things. But I knew I would invariably miss someone if I did that. But we do want to thank all the many partners who put those events on and provide opportunities for youths and other new anglers to fish. So thank you all. And I'll just conclude by saying, for those who applied for special commission permits, the commission has the authority and the privilege in law to award special commission permits to nonprofit organizations who are doing wildlife-related conservation or education or outreach work in Kentucky each year. And so they typically vote in the summer, and you all will be doing that at your August quarterly meeting, August 26th. And so I just want to let folks who applied know that our legal team is reviewing those currently. We just recently had the deadline to receive those. And once those have been vetted, the commission members, you all receive the packets with those applications for special commission permits for deer, elk, turkey, and waterfowl, and can review those and then decide how you'd like to cast your votes for organizations to receive those on August 26th. So we thank you for those who applied. We are appreciative again for all the many partners across the state, including those who applied for these permits as fundraisers or to raise funds for your work in Kentucky. And we wish you all luck. And thanks to our legal team for doing the review and due diligence on those. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. So before we get into our action items, Mr. Secretary, would you call the roll, please, sir?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Floyd?
Here.
Commissioner Fisher?
Present.
Commissioner Swallows?
Here.
Commissioner Lillard?
Here.
Commissioner Farrell?
Here.
Commissioner Horn?
Here.
I'm here. Commissioner Klein? Okay. Carl?
I'm here.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm here. Thank you.
All commissioners are present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. The first action item of the day is a review of the minutes from the April 22nd quarterly meeting and from the May 12th special call meeting that we had. Yesterday, a correction was needed to be made in the May 12th meeting. That was made, so it may not appear on your minutes today, but the one from May 12th was corrected yesterday. So, gentlemen, if you have reviewed your minutes, if there are any corrections or deletions that need to be made, please notify us at this point. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to accept these minutes.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
I have a motion to accept the minutes. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
I have a second to that motion. Any discussion about that? About accepting both the April 22nd and the May 12th minutes as written with the correction made on May 12th? If there is not, would you take the roll call vote, please, Mr. Secretary?
Commissioner Floyd? Aye. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Swallows?
Aye.
Commissioner Lillard?
Aye.
Commissioner Farrell?
Aye.
Commissioner Horn?
Aye.
I vote aye.
The motion carries. Minutes are accepted as written. Lisa Cox, I believe you have the quarterly financial report for us. Is that correct? Thank you, ma'am.
I've also asked Amanda Cook to come with me. She is our budget analyst, and she prepared the lion's share of the budget document that we will be covering next.
Good. So has the commission met her before, or are you?
Yes, and she's part of the budget working group.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to make
Welcome
sure
to
all the
both of you
commission
today.
members- Your quarterly financial reports are on page 11 of the agenda, and it's for March 2022.
Go ahead.
The March revenues are a little bit below 3/4 of the year, and that's because of the timing of our license receipts. They are on par or even a little bit above where they are normally in March. On your second page of your financial report, which is page 12, that is the March month, the last month of the quarter, and then the fiscal year to date as of March for the across the years. And if you notice, I mean, we're a little bit above on the expenditures to date, but part of that is the last 2 years our expenditures were down due to the pandemic. But for the most part, our revenues are above our expenditures where they would be, so our income, overall income is good as of the end of the third quarter. And then the last page of the financial report is on page 13. And those are our cash balances. I just thought I'd call out the Fish and Game Fund was at 26.8. It's at over 36 million today. Does anybody have any questions about the quarterly financial report?
Is there any explanation on the revenue for interest income, the reduction there, or the overlap, the previous budget amount? We did reach out. There's an investment group that we have to go through for our income pool, our interest pool, for anything that has interest that's earned on it by statute or federal regulation, which our Fish and Game Fund and our federal dollars require interest to be included. So when Chris Reese was even still at the cabinet, we reached out to that group, and they said it's because of the type of investments that they have to make. Those have been dropping, and where they were at all-time highs the year before, we would probably be better off to just put our money into a bank account that didn't have any interest at these losses. So I'll be reaching back out to see what we can do on a federal level, because I don't think there's anything we can change at a state level. This not only impacts the Fish and Game Fund, it really, we have a lot of cash in the stream mitigation fund, and so it's really impacting that as well.
So does everybody know exactly what Ralph is referring to? It's on page 11, the interest income, the third line down on revenue is that's what you're referring to, right?
Yes. That's significant.
That's a significant loss.
It's significant.
And Lisa, you're looking into a way to cure that problem.
Yeah, we're going to have to reach out to the feds to see if there's some way that we can do it within the state guidelines, because right now we're required. I think even the governor sits on that committee at finance in order to manage our funds.
Well, I don't know what we were getting before, but that's significant.
I know that year before last, it was, I want to say 500,000 at December. This is at March, to the good, and now we're going that much to the negative.
That's a significant reduction.
But the feds require that, is that correct?
The feds require us to have it in an interest account, and the way that we can do that is within the pool. There's long-term pools and short-term pools, but that's what we have to be in, is what we've been told. So, and it's the type of investments that they're limited to, those government type issued bonds that they're limited to.
How long would it be before you'd likely hear if you request from the federal government about changing where we have that?
I'm not real sure. All I can do is send that out, and hopefully we'd have that before the next meeting. And even if it was before the next meeting, I could always send a communication out to you all in an email. So,
yeah, I understand it. We have little control on that. I'm curious as to that.
Don't shoot the budget lady.
Treasury rates are going up right now. And Treasury rates are going up right now, and so there's some safe places to put money that are going to yield a lot more. And I would think that the state and the people managing that would be on that pretty. If there's not some restriction that they can't do it,
right.
They can buy 2-year Treasury bonds at
and
over 2%.
I want to say that the communication that I had at the state level was probably about 6 months ago, and I'll be happy to share that with you too.
I'm just curious.
Sure.
Mind if I make a comment?
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, mainly for our audience that might be watching online or some folks here, because we receive federal funds, it may be obvious to you, but we're subject to requirements in federal law and regulation and even policy about the use of our federal funds as well as our license dollars, which we use for match and on areas where federal funds are used, whether those are fishing areas or hunting areas. And so that's the reason we have to consult with those authorities, whether it's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or other agencies in the federal government, to make sure we follow those protocols. So just a point of explanation.
Thank you. Any other questions for Lisa concerning the quarterly financial reports? And again, Lisa, we thank your office for making these much more readable and understandable for the commission.
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Lisa. She's been very good to work with, and she's tolerated our meetings and inquiries through the budget, and she's been very forthcoming, and I appreciate her doing the job she does. She does a really good job. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan.
Yes.
Any other questions concerning the quarterly statement? I'll entertain a motion concerning the quarterly statement.
Make a motion to approve the quarterly statement.
Mr. Horn makes a motion to approve the quarterly financial statement. Is there a second to that motion? I have a second from Robin. Any further discussion? If there is none, Mr. Secretary, take a roll call.
Commissioner Floyd? Aye. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Swallows?
Aye.
Commissioner Lillard?
Aye.
Commissioner Farrell?
Aye.
Commissioner Horn?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. The next item on our action items is the 2023 budget, and we're going to hear from the Budget Working Group recommendations. Both those. So,
You want to go first?
yeah, who wants to take first?
Or you want us to go first?
You're welcome to go first.
Go ahead, Paul.
We worked with Lisa and her staff at the Budget Working Group this past week, Mr. Morgan and Dr. Floyd and I, and more or less went through all the list of capital projects, the budget as presented by the different divisions, and we got back and forth over a couple of days of questions and comments, and it's our recommendation to approve the budget.
Thank you. Lisa, do you want to add to any of that? So the committee has gone, or not committee, the working group has gone over that, and I appreciate the work that they have done. I've talked to them a time or two, and I know they've poured over this pretty arduously and asked a lot of questions of you, which you
They
have
were
answered
thorough.
for them. So they were very thorough. So thank you, gentlemen, for being on that working group, and you've done a great job. So, Lisa, do you have anything that you want to add to their recommendation to accept the budget as you have been presented?
No, for the other commission members that weren't part of the process, I think it's worth mentioning that our budget went up significantly from last fiscal year, and that is due to, in part, the FILO, our Stream Mitigation Fund. Whenever we have an outside party manage those projects instead of the normal process that had been for the Finance Cabinet to manage those, that does not meet the KRS 45A, which is our model procurement code. It doesn't meet the definition of a capital project, and that was determined by the Governor's Office of State Budget Director and also by the Finance Cabinet. So we had to increase our restricted funds in order to accommodate. So capital projects are a little bit volatile. They're considered to be, these projects are probably average 10 years in length. And so it's hard to determine when those charges are going to be made. So within your budget is about $9 million worth of funding in order to cover those special type FILO projects, because we have to pay those out of our operating budget. Also in the session before last, as part of the budget bill, the Office of State Budget Director is no longer able to give us a restricted fund increase during the year, which they had been able to do before, and that's how we were handling these special FILO projects before, and that's why you hadn't seen it in the budget. But in addition to that, we have to have a little bit of a budget contingency for restricted funds, because since if we're not able to increase those during the year, so we've got about $5 million that we added for that budget contingency. This budget is very close to a break-even point of whenever you look at the Fish and Game Fund. Our operating budget is made up of the Fish and Game Fund primarily, federal funds, and for just one part of the department, those FELO restricted funds. So, but when you look specifically at the Fish and Game Fund, this like 2.5 to $6 million increase for the budget employee 8% raises, it's getting us very close. If what happens next year for the 12% budget, I just feel like I need, as the budget person, I need to tell you all so that you're aware that come the 12% in that second year, I'm concerned about the Fish and Game Fund meeting its obligations without looking for additional incomes. So we've been meeting with the alternate income group and also to look for ways to cut costs.
So the responsibility of raising that money is left totally to our department, not general funds. We will not receive any general funds
No
to
general
help
funds.
pay for that 12% legislated increase.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And so normally we go into another fiscal year, just so you know, we usually have about, our cash ebbs and flows with the different license sales. So we usually go in with about $20 million into a year. That is not an overage. That is a percentage of what we need to cover the next year. And so, I'm concerned that as we move down this path, we're going to start having more, a smaller and smaller balance going towards the next percentage of the year that we have to cover.
Thank you for that explanation.
I have a question.
Sure.
In our budget, how do we account for supply chain issues and also inflation at 8.2% against what we do in operation and everything else?
So that's part of that contingency that we built into the budget because of such things as those. Like for law enforcement last year, I want to say that we purchased 8 vehicles or so this fiscal year that had actually been ordered last fiscal year. And so they're going to, and with the increase in the cost of vehicles, the vehicles that they wanted to purchase, just using them as an example, is gone down by 2 vehicles just because of the cost. And then they have that concern about whether or not they're even the ones that we have budgeted this year, whether or not they'll really receive those. So it's I've been told that if you order a vehicle from some of the builders right now, they're not giving you something that will happen in this fiscal year. They're giving you a delivery date that could be even beyond the biennial fiscal year. Right. So it's making budgeting for that very challenging. Plus, we are looking at the history for the last 2 years where we didn't fill all of our seasonal positions. We didn't have full camps. There's a lot of things that affected how many people we hired just because of the pandemic. So, with all of that said, I'm just saying that sometimes it can be challenging to budget for it. We have been blessed that we have not seen a drop in income, for license sales, that sort of thing, because I know that there are a lot of state agencies who have.
Okay. Good. That's good.
I have a
good question. Yes, Mr. Floyd.
I want to be clear. I think that every one of us on the Board of Commissioners is delighted that our state employees have gotten a raise. We think that you all are worth even more than you get right now. We're so appreciative of all the good jobs that you all do. This amounts to an unfunded mandate, and that's all that we're saying here is we have to figure out a way to pay for that raise. But we in no way are we saying that we don't think that everyone deserves a raise. We really do. In fact, if you guys get the 12% raise next year, you deserve that too. We want this to go. We're just trying to figure out how to pay for it. That's all.
Okay.
Good comment.
If you don't mind, Chairman, one other thing. This is the operating and the capital construction budget. So towards the end, there's like a list of of active capital projects and expenditures, but on page 16 of this document, it kind of explains the different types of capital projects that we have. It has the FILO, the agency, ones that aren't at $1 million, in any one project, but we have a maintenance fund set up for those. And something that the commission had already passed was the Camp Earl Wallace Dining Hall construction. That's at $3.5 million, but we expect that the expenditures just for this year to be around $300,000. One thing I have not included on here, and I know that you all will be meeting about later today, is the Taya property. So that should probably also be on page 16, assuming that gets passed, but that's why that's not on there. So.
That's page 16, gentlemen, of your packet. It's not in your agenda packet. If you want to look at that.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, so the
Ron?
alternate income working group already meeting, and when do we expect to have some feedback from them?
Robin, do you want to
Yes,
explain that?
We have already met twice. What we're going to do is open up suggestions to the staff here, because those are the people that have their boots on the ground, that may be able to see a place that we can increase our revenue or decrease our cost. Our final recommendations won't be ready until we actually hear from them. But we have several ideas that we think might be beneficial financially for us. I think we're going to get it done. There's not going to be one single grand slam home run thing that we can do to make up $2.6 million or however much it is. But hopefully we'll be able to do some of the things that our stakeholders have asked, which just will be financially beneficial, and end up maybe we'll be able to pay for the additional cost. We certainly are trying hard.
Are we getting individuals from all districts involved in that feedback? Or can we try to do that?
Anybody that has any ideas, we would listen to anybody's idea.
Well, I mean, as far as employees of the department, making sure all divisions are represented and all districts are represented.
I do think you're all just going to turn it loose to all staff members.
Anybody that
give
might
us
have
any
an
ideas
idea.
you can. Trying to get ahead of that tsunami is what that working group's done. So just like the budget working group, the working group on alternative income is working hard too, to try to stay ahead of the tsunami that awaits us. So I know they're working real hard at it too. So thank you all for your hard work too, and got some great ideas. I might add, there's some great ideas in that working group.
I think the sportsmen of our state will be delighted with some of the things that we're going to recommend that are done.
And some of those recommendations have come from the sportsmen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So appreciate the fact that sportsmen are trying to help us determine ways of alternative means of income.
I was just going to follow up and just clarify. Yes, we do intend to follow up, send a correspondence out to all staff, soliciting input. There is actually a formal employee suggestion system process where employees can make recommendations to improve efficiency or enhance revenue for agencies like us that have revenue as opposed to general appropriations from the legislature. And then we do welcome, comments, suggestions from the public, from stakeholders. Folks can submit those through commission members or directly to us if they have suggestions.
Good. Any other questions concerning the 23 budget? Thank you all for your hard work, ladies. I'll entertain a motion concerning the 23 budget and the recommendation of the budget working group. Anybody?
Make a motion to accept the 23 budget.
You have made a motion, Paul Horn has made a motion that we accept the 23 budget as it's written, and I guess that's on page 11, isn't it, Commissioner Storm? On page 11, is there a second to that motion? Mr. Morgan makes a second to that motion. Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll for a vote.
Commissioner Floyd?
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Swallows?
Aye.
Commissioner Lillard?
Aye.
Commissioner Farrell?
Aye.
Commissioner Horn?
Aye.
I vote aye.
Motion unanimously carries. The next item on action items today is the prohibition of aircraft, drones, helicopters, airplanes for taking fish or wildlife. Colonel Gibson, I believe that's yours. Thank you, Lisa.
Good morning, gentlemen. This morning, we're back on the action item of drones and aircraft used to or attempt to take wildlife. During the interim between the discussion item and the action item, we worked and listened to sportsmen, to officers, to other members of the agency from Fisheries and Wildlife. And as we continue to get to the final spot before we take an action item on this and take a final vote, I've received a lot of input about our invasive carp program and the possibility that they might need the use of a drone. And before we make a final action item on this and you all take the final vote, I think it would be wise to pass this over to the next quarterly meeting, just so that we're at a place that everybody's had a chance to give input, because we did receive late input from our invasive carp program, and want to make sure that we don't make a mistake and have unintended consequences that prohibits the use of this technology to help fight the problem that we've got on those invasive species. And then other places that have come to light very quickly, there's other invasive species that we combat, and we want to make sure that we're getting it right and in abundance of caution, and to answer some of the sportsmen's concerns about scouting and legal activities. I've just met with one of our gentlemen back here today, and the concern, is always about, and I want to make sure that to say this so the public does hear it, our department, the drone use is not our department's business. Our business is the taking of wildlife that includes fish or animal species. And as we address that, any kind of regulation that we're passing here is really pointed towards the activity that we regulate, which is the hunting and fishing, not the flying of drones. If you want to fly a drone recreationally, you just can't do it in the conjunction with hunting, is what we're talking about. So much like we have other things that we don't tell people how to farm their land, we just tell them they can't bait for doves and hunt over it. They can put out all the wheat they want, but they can't shoot doves over it. That's the thing. We can't tell them how to farm. We can just tell them they can't hunt over it. So our job here is to regulate the activities that we're commissioned to regulate, which is the hunting and fishing part of it. So I just want to make sure that we're being very clear about what we're working on. And before we move forward with something like this, I don't want to make any unintended consequences that negatively impact recreational activity or much needed targeted species efforts towards our invasive problems. So that would be my recommendation on this one, but I'll answer any questions you might have about it.
Well, I think it's admirable, first of all, that we've slowed down enough that we can make sure we get it right the first time. So I don't believe there's anybody on the commission that would object to the fact that you all are suggesting that we put this action item off until next time so you can do a final little touch-up of some things. But we think that's probably admirable. Mr. Morgan, go ahead, sir.
I make a motion that we table this to be brought back up at the next quarterly meeting on the 26th.
Second.
26th, is that right?
Okay, so I have a motion to put this off until the next meeting as an action item. I have a second from, so that's from Mr. Morgan. I have a second from Ralph Swallows. Is there any further discussion on that? So the motion is to put this item off, the prohibition of aircraft for taking fish or wildlife, until the next meeting and make it a action item at the next meeting. No further discussion. Would you please take a vote, Mr. Secretary?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Floyd? Aye. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Swallows?
Aye.
Commissioner Lillard? Aye. Commissioner Farrell? Aye. Commissioner Horn?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Motion carries unanimously, so we'll put that off till the next time. Thank you, Colonel. That's all you have.
Can I ask one question, please?
Yes, sir.
Hope I don't sound ignorant here, but how do they use drones to combat Asian carp?
So they may be targeting schools of fish in shallow water and embayments where they might be able to be effective with netting or something like those technologies, where they can target their efforts to see where those fish are in shallow embayments that they might be able to capture. So that's from our invasive carp biologists down in Western Kentucky, and they passed that information along just this week to our director, and Director Dreves and I met yesterday, and we tried to get to a final spot on it. But when we realized, we just want to make sure we don't make a mistake, because that's such an important work that's going on down in our lakes, and we don't want to make any mistake that does somehow hinder their efforts. So that was what was reported up, that they had been trying some of that technology, and before we move forward on it, I want to make sure that we don't hinder their work. There's no rush here, because we're already at a point where this would not be effective for this year's big game seasons this fall. So it's like the time is on our side on this one. I mean, we're already past the date to be effective by September 1, where we would be typically looking at like our beginning of our deer and elk season starting in the fall. So it's pretty hard to get these things in place that quickly. So with that in mind, I think it's better to use time on our side to get it right.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Colonel. Appreciate your input, sir.
Thank you.
On page 2 of our agenda, our next item was reduce the bag limit of fall turkeys to 2 males. That was inadvertently put in an action item, and we're going to move it down to a discussion item. That'll be the first thing in our discussion items. So the next action item is land acquisition project from Cumberland Forest, and Ben Robinson is going to present that. Ben.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning. So we've got a very exciting opportunity to present to you today in the land acquisition realm. I think everybody's pretty familiar with this one already, but wanted to go ahead and kind of give you the update. And Gabe, I believe we have a map that we can share of CF Ataya property. CF Ataya, Cumberland Forest Ataya, and you'll see on the map here highlighted in red, it actually spans Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Obviously, we're just talking about the Kentucky portion today, but it's a 55,000 acre property spread across 3 counties in Bell, Knox, and Letcher, which is kind of in the heart of our elk zone. So this is pretty exciting to be able to gain access there, permanent access. Currently, the property is owned by CF Ataya LLC, and it's managed by the Nature Conservancy, who is a long-term partner of the agency. It's been under commercial interest for over 130 years. So the fact that we have a chance to partner on this and have a say in this property is pretty exciting. So what we're trying to acquire is permanent public access through the purchase of a permanent recreation access easement. The estimated cost of this is going to be around, we're believing $200 to $250 an acre. Obviously, that's pending appraisal, which is ongoing right now. If it does hit that target, we're looking between $11 and $14 million to acquire this easement. The good news is 75% of that cost comes from our federal grants, Pittman-Robertson Wildlife Restoration. The 25% required non-federal match has been provided by the General Assembly, as noted in Senate Bill 217. So no cost to the agency, essentially, which is very exciting to acquire permanent access on 55,000 acres at relatively no cost to the agency. I also want to note that the Commission did review this in closed session probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. I don't know.
Going on 2 years.
Time flies. However, the funding model has changed, as I just noted. So we wanted to bring this back before the Commission for final approval on using the funding model that I outlined.
So in Senate Bill 217, it was approved by the legislature to go ahead with the 25%.
That is correct, yes, sir.
And that's in perpetuity. The access to that land is in perpetuity.
Perpetuity, yes.
Questions from you all about that project? Some of you remember talking about this land acquisition a couple of years ago, some of you who were not there. But with the legislature, I remembered at the time that the Commission was concerned about coming up with that extra money, but with the legislature approving that, they're going to provide that other funding. So as Mr. Robinson has pointed out, there's really no cost to the agency.
So a couple questions on this. So as far as being able to manage that property, we just have the recreational access. There's still stuff that's going to be occurring on the property, and
There is. We have the opportunity to partner with the Nature Conservancy as we develop the easement terms, and we're going to have an actual management plan built into this as well. So the agency is going to have management rights over this property as well. It will still be under, there are some mineral ownership and whatnot, but there have been mineral reports done on this, mineral assessments by the Nature Conservancy. The likelihood of remining or new extraction is extremely low, which is something that we have to verify anyway when we're using federal grants. We can't use a federal grant on something that's the ground's all going to get turned back over. Otherwise, we'd be at risk of repaying the federal government that money. So we're pretty confident that the risk of new extraction is very low.
Other questions? Go
I
ahead.
have a question.
Go
I
ahead.
noticed that you said that this was in the elk zone. This is also up in the area where a lot of bear hunting. Would this potentially be available for public for bear hunting? as well?
Absolutely. This will essentially be treated like any other wildlife management area. So while it'll be prime elk hunting, also other species will be able to take advantage of every other species that's available.
Excellent.
So what's the total acreage?
55,000 acres.
Go ahead, Mr. Leary.
Who will hold the title?
Currently, I believe CF Ataya LLC.
I mean, after the acquisition.
After the acquisition, they will still hold the title. We're just getting a permanent recreation easement on it to grant us access. So the property could still be sold fee simple. However, no matter how it changes hands, we're still going to have the permanent access. And there'll be provisions written in the easement terms for development and whatnot. It will be extremely limited. So if the property did change hands, somebody can't come in there and develop the property.
Do you all, I just wondered if you foresee any problems with the private, is this private land in here?
That's actually in Virginia.
Oh, okay. And any of the places that, any of the places that we have private land in between or completely surrounded by that, no problems with that?
No, probably opportunity more than anything, because we're working on our East Kentucky Habitat Initiative right now, working with private landowners and large corporate landowners in that area to get prescribed fire on the ground and management practices. So it really provides us a lot of opportunity.
Other questions?
What elk zone is that? Do you know?
What zone?
Two,
Yeah, hunting unit.
Three as well.
Hunting unit 2 and 3.
Other questions, comments?
Unique opportunity. And we appreciate the legislature being receptive to those who, like the Nature Conservancy and the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, for approaching them and trying to advocate for this project to be a tremendous opportunity for sports people.
If there are no further questions, I'll entertain a motion concerning land acquisition, the Cumberland Forest land acquisition of 52,000 acres. Make a motion that we accept the land acquisition project. And second, so I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? If not, would you take a vote, sir, Mr. Secretary?
I'd be happy to, Mr. Chairman.
We may have to defer the final until we get back unless there's a majority, and then it won't, other than for the record, we won't need that vote. Go ahead, sir. Call roll.
Oh, I see. Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Swallows?
Aye.
Commissioner Lillard?
Aye.
Commissioner Farrell?
Aye.
Commissioner Horn?
Aye.
I vote aye. Would you like to wait on Commissioner Floyd? Or could he?
Well, we have a majority already,
We do.
but we need to probably record his vote, unless he was, what do you say, counsel? Do we need to wait for his vote? Or since we have a majority in favor, or do you want to just go down that his vote was not taken?
I'd say it wouldn't hurt to wait for his vote. I was actually about to raise my hand and ask to speak for a second.
Okay.
Just in regard, we mentioned that there was a closed session previously in regards to this property. Now we're doing it in open session. Just to clarify, the exception to the Open Meetings Act that allows us to go into closed session for the acquisition of property is based upon the intent to protect this Commonwealth's interest and avoid undue publicity that would possibly impact our ability to purchase, impact our purchase price, and so forth. Since the legislature had actually passed a law regarding the purchase of this property, closed session is no longer appropriate, and so we're doing an open session this time just to clarify why we made that change.
Thank you for that clarification. So, you want to take a break for a few minutes? Anybody want to take a break, or to wait for this vote? Since
Here we go. Perfect timing.
Good time.
Perfect timing.
Do we have, for the record, do we call the person who made the motion in a second? Do we have that on
Yes.
record?
Well, on the board. Did she put it up?
I don't know who made the second.
Fisher?
Okay, Fisher made the second.
Thank you.
Lillard made the motion.
Just to be clear.
Thank you. I know she's over there writing them down. So, Mr. Floyd, Dr. Floyd, excuse me, we need your vote on the land acquisition project. We have an aye. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. On our first discussion item, if you would stay with us, Ben, the first discussion item is the one that we've moved down into that category, reduce the bag limit for fall turkey to 2 males. Do you want to explain why that's being brought up as a discussion item?
Sure. You can see on the agenda, it's listed as reduce the bag limit of fall turkeys to 2 males. Essentially, this is more of a cleanup item. If you reference back to the December 21 meeting, when several changes were passed involving our turkey regulations, the commission did vote to approve reducing the hen harvest in the fall turkey season. However, as we started drafting the regulation changes on this, we realized there was a bit of an oversight. Even though we eliminated hens from the harvest, we didn't adjust the bag limit. So technically, the bag limit still sets at 4 turkeys for the fall. So we wanted to bring that back up as an item to clarify how you guys would like to move forward with that.
And we did initially, we put it on as an action item, even though it's a one step in the sense that this particular point has not been a new business, a discussion, an action item. We consulted with the chair. He allowed us to do this as a cleanup item because it related to turkey topics or agenda items that have been discussed for going on 2 years previously. So thank you for that deference, at least in putting it on the agenda. And if it were to be enacted for this fall, it would need to be acted on today. And so that's the reason we proposed putting it on as an action item. If it's deferred, it would be applicable. If you all took action on it, say, for example, approved it or modified it, it would be enacted for next fall if it's voted on in August, for example, or later. So we just wanted to give you that just in transparency to you all.
So to be clear, if we don't do this and we pass, this is still going to be an action item that we'll take a vote on today.
No.
This is a discussion.
I preferred, and we discussed it. We had it on there, but I think we have not asked the sportsman to weigh in on that particular thing. So, in fairness to the sportsman, I really think that we should put that off and let the comments of sportsmen deal with that issue, because we have not made that. We did not make that a discussion item last time, so I wanted to back it up so they could put comments on whether they want to allow 4 this year or not, and then we can change it for next year. So it was in this action item, but I thought it best probably to move it to discussion item instead of trying to pass that for this fall. I don't believe there's going to be any objection to cutting back on that harvest, but that's not the way we said we do on discussion items and action items. We're kind of jumping ahead on an action item if we do that without finding out what the sportsmen want to do with that.
Mr. Chair, you mind if I ask a point of clarification?
Yeah, go ahead. Right.
So Ben or Zach, would you all just review, I know we discussed this, some may say ad nauseum, but at length in the last couple of years when these items were on the agenda, would you remind the members or refresh their memories on the scope? So like how many hens were previously taken in the fall, and how many likely gobblers this would affect? Most, if I remember correctly, most of our fall turkey hunters are harvesting 1 or maybe 2 birds anyway. So it's probably not an emergency situation or creating any kind of a major concern from a biological standpoint. But we just wanted to get that clarification for you all as they consider whether to take action on this today or at a subsequent meeting.
Zach Danks, our turkey program coordinator, joined me, and he can clarify that.
Right, so fall turkey harvest the last several years has ranged from about 1,500 to 2,000 birds total. Of those, 60 to 65% are female birds, or hens. Okay, and so with the reg change passed last December, we'll no longer be harvesting hens. So that'll significantly reduce fall harvest in total. In doing that, and by not addressing the total fall bag limit, once hens are no longer legal, then it will be possible to harvest 4 male birds in the fall. Now, as I said, based on recent trends, it's going to be a low overall number of male birds harvested anyway. but it leaves the potential for folks to harvest, 4 birds in the fall. Now, the regs currently state that only 2 of those can be taken with a shotgun. The vast majority of birds are taken with a shotgun in the fall. So it's just reducing the bag limit in this case might be in keeping with the spirit of the reg change. It's not that we think there's going to be a mad rush on harvesting gobblers in the fall. It just seems it might be an appropriate step to go concurrent with the no hen change.
So, Mr. Chairman, hang on, let him finish his point.
Yeah.
Because I suggested that we move this as a discussion item only because we really hadn't discussed this part of that segment of reduction of hunting. But if it's the pleasure of the commission and you all vote to go ahead and make it an action item, you'll jump it ahead of the discussion time. And so we can entertain the fact that if somebody says, I want to go ahead and do it now, then you might have a sportsman or 2 call you and say, we didn't have time to put our input in that. But my desire to move that to discussion can be overridden by you all deciding that you want to vote on that today. But you go ahead with what I just wanted to interject that so that everybody on the commission understands that if you all override my desire to make this the discussion item and you vote on it to do it, we'll make it happen.
Okay, I'm trying to catch up here. So if we don't do this now, then fall season remains as is.
Correct.
All right. We've been advised by Zach and Wildlife Division that it could make a difference if everybody goes out and harvests 4 toms or four males, possibly, 2 with a shotgun, 2 with a bow. But you've also said that when we made this, if we passed this as an action item in the past, that this reduction in hens would have a negligible impact on what we're doing anyway.
Correct.
Correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, I've heard from constituents that are seriously concerned about our turkey population, but I've also heard from those who hunt the fall hens that it's important to them too. So I was trying to clarify if we were going to keep things as they are for another season.
You mean with male birds? Because we've already voted on the females, the stoppage of shooting females. That's already been voted on.
LRC has it.
So we're on. Okay, that's where I'm catching up here.
Let's let them clarify something.
Not yet.
Go ahead.
It needs to be soon.
The change that was voted on in December has not went to LRC yet, so that will not take effect this hunting season.
We still have time. We were drafting this, and as we were drafting it, getting it ready to get to LRC, that's when this point was made and where it came up, which is why we had a chance to bring it back before you guys. We do still have time, if we rush and get this through, for the hens to take effect this coming season.
So the deadline actually is I believe if Jenny can correct us here if we're wrong, but I believe the 15th. So we filed by June 15. It could be in effect for this fall. That is the removal of hens from the bag and the other changes for fall. So depending on what you want to do here, if we don't include this as an action item or vote on it today, if there were to be a change in the bag limit of males, then we could promulgate this regulation for next year if it's voted on hereafter. So it's just this particular provision that we're...
But I'm sorry.
Hang on one second. So, Mr. Dykes, you're saying that 60% of the fall harvest is females. So that's over 1,000 birds, right?
Yeah, 60% of 1,500, whatever that comes
to. So near 1,000 birds. Well, that's a lot of poles. That's saving a lot of poles.
It is. Essentially, fall turkey hunting is a very different sport, and it's less specific on targeting a sex. You're targeting flocks typically, and so it's much of the fall opportunity has been reduced by the elimination of hens in the bag. Right. So it's not that we fear the absolute number of gobblers to be excessive, but in keeping with the Commission's conservative approach in reducing the hens, it's a possibility. And if you want to do that, it needs to get done now in order to get filed in time.
Mr. Floyd, Dr. Floyd, I apologize.
No, that's all right. like Commissioner Swallows, I have also received quite a bit of input from sportsmen on this, particularly folks that enjoy fall turkey hunting. Most of those would not be in favor of us harvesting 4 males in the fall because I feel as though we maybe haven't gotten quite as much public input as we really could, and because the effects of what we did approve would be relatively negligible, I would be in favor of tabling this today. And I don't think there's any rush to get this through because we're already only harvesting 15 to 2,000 in the fall. So I don't think that we should be in any rush to get it through. I think the most important thing is we get it right.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. So you would like to table this.
Yes.
Your side is to go ahead with it today. Am I understanding?
Well,
or
I'm wanting to understand that as it stands today, we vote, there is no hen harvest this coming fall.
That has already, that
All right.
vote has already
Okay.
occurred, but
So,
it could be amended.
We're only talking about bag
and
limit
added
here.
Okay.
But would we,
Hang on, Mr. Morgan, you're next.
Well, here's the only concern that I have. I do not believe that the effectiveness of a regulation determines the integrity of the process. And I'm not comfortable with skipping over the process and jumping over a discussion item, going straight to an action item. Because I get lots of stuff, and people are aware of the procedure and the way we do it. And I am for staying with the procedure. And that's all I got to say.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Fisher.
so my question would be, if we skip this today, we wouldn't file the elimination of hens then, right? For this, I mean, because you can't have 2 regs go, and we wouldn't want to do that.
Hang on.
Now, that probably turn that back to Chairman Kleiner, but it was voted on by the commission in December, so we had every intent of going ahead and promulgating that regulation. Now, if it's the commission's desire to hold that, that's...
We'd have to vote on that
Yeah,
because
you'd
it's
have to-
already been approved.
Right.
So
It's
we're
been
either going to
approved,
have to
so-
go back and amend the fact that no hens would be harvested, or we go on with that one and then add any other law the next time around or any other thing. Hang on.
All right.
I see your hand.
I got it.
So we're either going to go ahead with this, or we're going to have to amend that with a vote to amend before it goes to LRC what we've already decided we want to happen.
So I think we're going to have to do that, because if we leave this as is, then it's 4 turkeys in the fall, male.
Same as it is today. There's no change.
No male. I mean, well,
No,
It's
hen-
already
no
there
hens.
now. It's
yeah,
already
you
there
can
now.
do- well, okay.
So,
I was thinking
if you
do
come
4
back,
gobblers,
if you
but it
come
would be-
back and look at this
Yeah.
again, then the next time around, if you wanted to reduce it, you could say
Like in those
2
recommended-
by any method, males in the fall. Hang on, let me do you first. Gentlemen, let's try to do this in the order of recognition, not just blurt out. So let's try to do this for the Robert's rules. Go ahead,
So
sir.
I've heard this from multiple people, and I mean, in my district, the concern about the turkey population is great, but I've also heard from people across the state and other districts too that are hunters. We have an unintended consequence on something that we were trying to do to improve. We were advised by our program director and a biologist here that this will have a negligible impact on what our turkey population is if we go forward on it. I think we should respect both sides. If we can entertain an amendment to this motion, would it be possible that we land in the middle on this and we amend the current regulation as we've got it right now to be 1 hen and 1 male?
That's your suggestion at this point. So hang on to that. We have,
All right.
that's not in the form of a motion. That's what you're discussing. at this
Yeah,
point.
that's-
So hang on to that. Let me let the deputy commissioner make his comment.
All
I want to get the comments out before anybody makes any kind of motion, because if we don't, we're going to go back and amend an amendment.
Thank you. So, not trying to obfuscate here, I actually want to try to make things clear, so I'm going to attempt to do that on a couple of points. One is, so we have not filed because we've been working on the legal language and working with LRC on exactly how we can frame this, staff, to make sure we cover all the provisions we need, and that's how this came to light, this particular item, that the bag limit wasn't specifically addressed. If the commission so wanted to, reduce it, the total number of birds that could be harvested in the fall. So filing immediately with the proviso that it may or may not make it through the legislative process. We presume it probably would before the first fall season. But if it doesn't, it would be applicable next year. If it does, it would be applicable, the removal of hens from the bag limit would be applicable for our shotgun season this fall. The other point I want to bring out in deference to our team that does our communications and also our marketing team that tries to encourage participation is sometimes when we're working on regulations in process within a year and trying to get them done, which is your purview and sometimes ours. Sometimes we want regulations quickly because there's an emergency issue or a resource issue needing to be taken care of, or cleanup in some cases. If we do make this change, we file this and remove the hens from the bag and it's effective before, let's say, the fall shotgun seasons, we have a little bit of a quandary with our hunting guide. So again, just sharing this with full transparency. What we typically have done in the past, for example, with bear seasons, is we make a note in the hunting guide, pending changes or changes are pending with final approval at the legislature. Please consult our website. That can be a little bit confusing for the end user, for the hunter, sometimes the angler, but usually it's hunting regulations. And so I just want to mention that's a potential wrinkle here. So if we make this change, we will have to include a reference in our guide, which is getting ready to go to press right now for this fall, and it would indicate for fall turkey hunting under that section that changes are pending that could affect the bag limits and what sexes of birds could be taken. So I just wanted to, again, in full transparency to you all, try to explain where we are. So if we file, regardless of what happens with this particular item, we file the change to remove hens from the bag limit, we will still have that reference in the guide. So if you all want to help our information group and our marketing groups to be clearer, more seamless, we might wait on this to file it until you all decide later this fall, and then it'll take effect next fall. In other words, we could file all the changes at a later point, and so our guide could proceed on, but that would mean that the hens would still be in the bag limit for this fall.
So
if we don't file in June.
Then that means that we would have to have a vote to nullify the previous vote in December to eliminate.
No, sir, just be a matter of when we file that change. Right. So in other words, we still have you all voting. We're working on the language for that to file it with the legislature.
But Ralph's indication is that he'd like to have one hen and one, so we'd have to go back and amend that because we have no hens now.
Yes, sir. You're right. Yes, sir. On that particular point,
so you're going to have to go back and amend that. If you vote to nullify what has already been approved, then you can go back and approve one hen and one. Because if you don't, and you go ahead with nullifying the hens now, you're going to have to go back and amend that.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, since it's not been filed, since the changes to the fall season have not been filed, you all could make changes based on a motion here today or a motion in August, and we just hold on filing any changes to the fall regulation until this is settled. It's your purview. And the spring change, any spring changes, we would file.
And my comment right now, Ralph, and I know you say you hear from sportsmen who'd like to go ahead and take that hen if it's not a negligible. I mean, it's negligible. I kind of think 1,000, near 1,000. Hang on, 1,000 hens is a pretty good number of turkeys saved. However, hang on. But you're also going to hear from your sportsmen. You're going to hear from your sportsmen who are going to say, Dr. Kleinert, you didn't do this in the order. You voted on a non-emergency item. So you're going to hear the same number of sportsmen say, you all took this out of order. It was supposed to be a discussion item, and you made it an action item. So we've got two groups of sportsmen here. Some will want to kill hens in the fall. We've got another who's saying you've taken this out of order, and you're going to hear from both. You will hear from both.
Well, I
Paul?
grant you we are.
Go ahead, Paul.
One point of clarification or discussion. If this is filed on June the 15th, will it be in effect by September 1st for archery season? Yes or no?
Probably not.
No.
So that's more confusion.
Yeah. I think our best bet is table it. Let's get it right. Do what we did with the drones. Let's get it right.
Okay, table this aspect and then worry about the fall no hens for next year, because it's probably not going to be in effect. It'll be in effect for the gun season, right, Mr. Danks? But it would not be. It probably.
Depends on the process.
Okay. So is everybody up with that now? Up to that speed?
So as it stands, you'll be able to shoot 4. I know you can only shoot 2 because you can only take 2 with a shotgun.
And you won't have time for this archery if this does not go through. So it'd be 2. And you can always go back.
I think we should, by mandate, we should follow our protocol. And
that's the reason that I wanted to move to discussion, because I knew that I'd get calls. Now, that was an emergency, and you usually like to do those emergencies only, and I don't know that we declare that emergency.
Mr. Chairman, a quick comment.
Yes, sir.
If the department waits before they go over to the state legislature, and we table this, there will be no change for the fall or any of this year unless he files it. If he does not file it, we can amend it, change it, just like we're doing the other one, and stay in the procedure and get it right.
That's correct.
And not change anything. The season would not change at all.
That's right.
And that's a good thing.
That's correct.
I agree to that.
Go ahead.
One more quick point.
I'll take heed on
Stand by, gentlemen.
on the other.
Stand by.
Yes, sir.
So we did have a change, just to clarify, and I'll let these gentlemen correct me if there were additional things. I know at least we had one change for spring season, which was to restrict harvest on WMAs to 1 legal bird in spring. That will be filed. So our intention is to go ahead and file that. That was voted on in December. I believe that was the only change to the spring season. And Jenny, the rest of you all correct me if I'm wrong there, Zach. So that we would go ahead and file. That'd be for spring. But for next fall, we could delay filing this until this is resolved. File it all with all the changes. File it at one time with all the changes, and it would be much easier if we know before June, when we're getting ready to print the guide for the fall, if we can have all those changes ready. So I will say, on behalf of looking at holistically across the whole department, for us it would be simpler, assuming there's no adverse biological impact. And I think our wildlife staff have said that while some people passionately don't want any hens harvested, from a population standpoint, we don't believe there's any biological, impact at a large level. So I think wildlife staff would be comfortable with doing that, although we do want to follow the will of the commission to implement these as soon as possible, which we'd recommend for next fall.
Who else had a comment?
I have a question for Mr. Danks.
Go ahead, Dr. Ford.
Mr. Danks, what percentage of the total number of turkey are harvested in the fall?
30,000 total, roughly, on average, last several years, 15 to 2,000. So say 2,000.
A very low percentage.
2,000 out of 30,000 is a low percentage.
Yeah. So we can.
Was it 20,000 this year? How many this year?
20.
Just shy of 27,000 total turkeys this spring.
So I think we can. I think whatever we do, the effect is going to be negligible. So I think, because no matter if we go with our recommendations that I think that would exclude hens, or if we let it stay as it is, the effect still is negligible either way on the total turkey population. So it would be my strong feeling that we need to get this right instead of being in any hurry to do it.
Okay, so let's see if I can back this all up. At this point, we have no females that could be filed that has not yet been filed. This has been, or I moved it to a discussion item to avoid sportsmen saying you're out of order with the sequence of events from new business to discussions to action items. That's why I moved that. So is it the pleasure of the commission to make this an action item next time or table it until further studies? Because if you make it an action item today, we're going to have to deal with it. If you make it a discussion item today, move to an action item next time, you're going to have to deal with it in August. So what's the pleasure of the commission with dealing with reduction of the bag limit of fall turkeys to 2 males today? In other words, do you want to table this indefinitely or until you do further research on it, or do you want to table it until the next meeting, or do you want to act on it today to try to go ahead and pass something concerning that today? We've got to make one of 3 decisions right now.
I would make a recommendation that we bring it up as a discussion item next time, so we have input from everyone.
Okay. Is that your discussion right now? Or
That's
is that
my discussion.
Okay, that's not in the form of a motion, because I don't want to get too far down the motion thing, because we're going to have to back up and amend that. Anybody else have any discussion about that?
I would agree with Paul.
Okay, that's right. Ralph? Speak now, Ralph, or forever hold your peace.
Well,
Okay, and now go ahead, Commissioner.
Go ahead.
Okay.
A very quick comment. It's only that we have, and you all probably remember, we belabored this, but we have been asking for typically 7-8 months at least. So we're trying to do regulation changes a year out, not only to allow for legislative process, which sometimes can be longer than 6 months, can be 7-8 months, can be longer if the committee doesn't meet, legislative committee doesn't meet in a given month, which they sometimes do cancel their meetings. We especially had that in COVID. Typically, 8 months is plenty. However, if this was voted on in December, for us to file it, there could be, if there was a delay, there could be an issue by the time we need our guide baked, which we begin working on in May, for changes to go to print in June, late June, to be able to have that out in August for the fall season. So I think our recommendation, Wildlife and I together would recommend, if possible, to make an action on this at the next meeting. And we would be allowing nearly 3 months for input from you all and from stakeholders by that time, without any disrespect. And I appreciate you all wanting to follow the process. I will say, when we began the 3-step process in January of 2020, we did allow for, explicitly allow for situations where we have either emergency regulations or cleanup or things like that might come to you all in a shorter, fashion. And so this, I appreciate your interest in getting public input and wanting to be deliberate. We would request that action be taken on it if possible in August, just to allow plenty of time to get through the legislative process and then to work on the language for the fall hunting guide for next year.
Mr. Robinson, is that yours? He's presumptive that that's your suggestion also, so I'm going to ask you directly. Is that your suggestion also?
I think we could agree with that, yes.
So, okay. One point, just to make sure that we're on the page. If we do not take action today, if we do that, we wait until the next time. Come the fall season, we can take 2 hens and 2 toms, correct?
No.
Well, it's sort of talking 2 separate things here, because taking action today, we still have the December 20 action that was passed
Right.
to reduce hens. So we have to determine how we're going to approach that, along with how we're going to address the bag limit. So really 2 separate issues.
So legal, would it be okay to, if you want to put this off with hens, would it be okay to vote today to stop the filing of that was decided in December? In other words, could somebody make a motion today that we stop the filing of that until we have also determined this other portion of the possibility of reduction of turkeys in the fall concerning male turkeys? So can we stop the movement of that?
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. It's really just something that kind of goes at the pace that we can manage to get it out. We normally don't address that in the commission meetings, but if you want us to hold and file it all at once, that's perfectly fine. We can all do that.
There you go.
So does everybody understand what I just asked him? Would you feel better about voting to stop the filing of this at this point and put this as an action item at the next one?
I can live with that.
Thank you, Lord. Go ahead, Mr. Lewis.
I'd like to make a motion that we stop the filing of what we discussed in December until next quarterly meeting, where we make a decision that we're going to vote on the hen count.
And you want to put this in your next, today's discussion item to be advanced on to an action item next time, the reduction of the bag limit of 2 males.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Does everybody understand that motion?
Yes, but I want to amend it.
Well, no, we're going to have to discuss it first.
Okay.
We're going to have to get a second to that. Anybody want to second that motion? Because we've got to do it in that order. Yes, Mr. Porter.
Mr. Chairman, just so everybody knows, with the effect of that motion, that means the fall season will remain status quo as it exists today.
That's correct.
That's what I was trying to establish.
That is correct.
All right.
Now, is there a second to that motion that I have before us now? If not, that motion dies.
That changes this fall.
Right.
Do you have a second to that motion? So, gentlemen, no sidebar discussions until we get this resolved. We got it? Okay. I have a second to that motion. So the motion being that we stop the filing of the hen reduction in the fall, and that we make this item that we have used as a discussion item today an action item to be taken next time, as well as the item dealing with the hens that we have delayed at the next, or until the next meeting. Any discussion about that? If you've got an amendment, we're going to have to do it after.
No, as
this
long as his motion, because the way he stated it was the discussion in the December meeting, but as long as it's specific to
we voted on it in December. The discussion.
But there were other turkey items we voted on. So I want to be very specific that it's to the reduction of the fall hens.
That is what you meant, the reduction of that particular portion of what we passed.
clarify that, I will stop my discussion.
Have you got that, Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Okay. If there's no further discussion of that, because we're going to take a break here in a minute, would you take a roll call on that motion? On the motion to delay the filing of the portion that has to deal with no hens in the fall, as well as make this reduction bag limit of the fall turkeys to 2 males, no more than 1 of 3, what we've talked as a discussion item today, address that at the August meeting.
August 26th. Yes, sir, Mr.
Everybody
Chairman.
understands the motion. Please take a roll call.
Commissioner Floyd.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Swallows.
I'm not sure.
Then are you not making the vote?
Can I just say?
Yeah, you can describe why.
I've
You
heard.
can describe why you want to vote.
Well, I've
the way
heard
you're
loud and
voting.
clear from a lot of people about the importance of not harvesting hens in the fall. I've heard from many people too about, this is something important that I want to do.
So your vote
but
is?
I want to respect the
your vote is?
process. So my vote is aye.
Okay.
So Commissioner Swallows votes aye.
Yes, sir.
Debate is over. So at this point, you can explain why you're going to vote the way you are, but the debate is over at this point. So you can explain your vote, but we're not going to debate on it. Go ahead.
Commissioner Lillard.
I will explain mine as well then.
Okay.
Just because of some of the, what I'm going to call naysayers and name throwers and talking bad about the commission is the reason I think we should change it and follow the process that we said we're going to follow. I want to make sure that the sportsmen and women get the opportunity to speak on the topic. And my vote is aye.
Thank you.
Commissioner Farrell.
My vote is aye because the sportsmen need to be aware of what's going on and have some input as well.
Commissioner Horn.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Motion carries unanimously. I'd like to declare about a 15, let's see, it is now 9:57. Let's reconvene at 10:15, gentlemen. Take a break. Welcome back. We're reconvening our meeting after a well-needed break. We'll go back to our discussion items, and if it please the commission, on the discussion items, I will not ask for a vote on these remaining discussion items. I will merely ask if there are any objections to moving it on to an action item. If there are, then we will need to take a vote. Otherwise, I will ask if it's okay to move that on. If there are no objections, we'll move them on to an action item. Otherwise, we'll vote on it if there is an objection, if somebody, and we'll get a count on who wants to. So the next discussion item is clarify bear chase permit requirements. Go ahead, Colonel.
Yes, sir. This item's on for as a discussion item today. We're talking about amending 301 KAR 2.300. And the points of this one that we discussed in our new business last time was to specify that all participants in a bear chase shall have a bear chase permit in addition to any valid Kentucky hunting license. Clarify that those attempting to harvest a bear shall have a bear permit in addition to a valid annual Kentucky hunting license and chase permit, and then to create a non-resident bear chase permit. Those are the items that were discussed before.
Paul, did you have a comment about this or a question that you had? I believe you asked me.
No, I just was going to clarify that last time we had a couple other items concerning bears that were brought up as new business that we can have some update on or discussion on, as well as the bear chase permit.
I'm not sure if Ben is still with us. Ben, are you still? Would you speak to that just in terms of the research you all are doing?
Sure. Mr. Horner, you referring to spring bear season and
Extended chase.
Yeah, we are in the process of gathering information on that, and we'll get that back out to you guys shortly.
Okay, thank you.
I'm wondering, have any commission members gotten any feedback from people in your areas about this clarifying bear chase permit? Paul, I think you had, but
Just the Bear Club in our district was in favor of modifying it to have non-residents participate in the chase for a number of reasons. People coming in to look at dogs, people coming in that participate in other states, reciprocity between the states.
And Colonel, you were aware of those?
Yes, sir.
Those concerns.
Those were the concerns that brought that we in discussion with our Bear Association, Hunters Association, was where a lot of the emphasis come on this actually, and just trying to be responsive to the sportsmen in this particular area.
So the next time that you come back, in the event that we move that on to an action item, you'll have everything pretty well solidified, you feel like, with the things you want to, as it will read?
Yes, sir. The draft language.
Okay. Yeah, good.
If needed, or some sort of
Mr.
idea.
Farrell?
Yes, I had several calls about people not wanting the non-residents at all. But as we discussed earlier, the reciprocity, so we can go to Tennessee or Tennessee can come up here. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. They say our bear population is too low to outsource this to non-residents. But if we're going down there and they're coming up here, it makes sense. So I don't think that they realize that.
Right. That's a good thought. Mr. Morgan?
The two comments that I would have that we need to discuss is paying for the bear chase season and for the season to harvest, the permit to harvest a bear. I think we discussed maybe if you buy the chase season and then you decide to harvest a bear later on, that you would get a reduction in price. I think some sort of thing like that would be good. And also it's been brought to my attention by more than one group that maybe we could consider adding the harvesting a bear to the sportsman license. So that's two things to consider.
Colonel, I see you making notes, so you're
Absolutely. That's why the value of our process is to have the discussion and let you all have input, and then before we move forward to an action, we've done our very best to create a positive regulation that improves our habitat, our wildlife management, but also meets the sportsman's needs and the commission's desires. So I'll make the notes. We'll talk about it. The Wildlife Division and I've talked about this numerous times. The reason we talked about this was we want to be very clear. The original language was not clear as to what they might have needed to participate, and that was the complaint that Commissioner Horn and I both heard was from the bear. Do they need this? Do they need that? And we interpret that they do, and we want to make sure that we're clear. I don't want anybody to read one of our regulations or our handbook and leave it and not know what the right answer is. So this was all meant 100% to make it very clear so that these things are, this is what you shall have to participate.
Okay. Commissioner? Wait, no, I got Commissioner's next.
Very quick point, I promise. We had one member, and I believe it may have been Commissioner Member Horn, asked about how many permits we currently have for residents, just to get an idea of scale of how many permits we sell. And in this last license year, it just ended February 28th, it was 23. And the previous license year was 20. So we're not talking about, at least for residents, not a huge number of the chase permits being sold.
Now, go ahead, Mr. Swall.
As Commissioner Farrell mentioned, he had people contact him about non-resident, and so did I, with that same, we don't need a non-resident bear permit, but I appreciate your comment on that.
Well, can he give us an idea on the bear population?
That would be.
They're saying there's not enough.
Yeah, that would be Dr. Hasta's part. There's
John, you're welcome to come see.
Come on up here. I got somebody else to answer that one. Come on up here, Dr. Hasta. Get some.
Behind it here. Specifically with Chase, sure, that's not necessarily a consumptive kind of deal. But adding the chase permit would allow non-residents to come in and harvest bears. So it's something that I'll talk about in my update here when we talk about bear season. We've got a good growing population. We've got very fresh research from down in the Big South Fork in McCreary County that shows that is a very healthy bear population. What I want to be careful doing is just blowing the top off of it right away. We have incrementally adjusted regulations and increased harvest over the years, which I think is a very healthy way to do it. I just don't want to do too much too quick. And we've also got the regulations you guys voted on last September. I kind of want to see what's going to happen with those before we get too crazy, honestly.
Thank you. Now, go ahead, Mr.
The bear chase permit, you mentioned that would increase, allow per kill?
No. So the bear, essentially by proxy, if we already have an out-of-state bear permit. You can harvest it right now, coming up this fall with archery or modern gun. So basically by adding an out-of-state chase permit, that allows out-of-staters to come in and both chase, and they can already buy the harvest permit.
Okay.
So we would essentially be making, bear hunting with dogs open to non-residents.
That's the end result of adding those. Now, and it's exactly what Dr. Hasta is saying, the non-residents are not permitted to buy a chase permit, so then therefore they by default can't harvest because they're not eligible for the chase. By allowing them to chase, they already are eligible to harvest on modern gun already and archery. So they just couldn't use the dog part of it to participate. But they were, when we saw non-resident, I don't know the number. Do you know the number of non-residents we had last year?
Oh, it's just a handful, honestly.
Yeah, it's not very.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Dr. Hassett?
Go ahead, sir.
So if we add non-resident or any other group, the quotas are going to stay the same, correct?
Correct.
So you're not going to harvest any more bears. You're just allowing a few more people to participate.
Yes and no. The regs that are currently going through right now will get rid of that quota, what you guys voted on last September. If they're in place for the fall.
They're days instead of quota.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, they're days instead of quota, right?
Correct.
Right.
And so I would love to have a year or two to just evaluate kind of what's going on, make sure I'm in the right ballpark on those days, match up with our old quota before we add additional harvest pressure.
But we're going to have that experience this year. They're not going to be able to come in this year and use it. So you'll have that data this year.
Yep.
Correct? That's what I mean.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions for these two gentlemen?
One more clarification. This has nothing to do with extended days or anything else. This amendment. Correct?
Address that.
This discussion item moved to an action item has nothing to do with extended hunting days, chase season, or anything else.
There we go.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
If there are no further questions and there are no objections to passing this on to an action item, we'll pass that on. Are there any objections to passing this on to an action item next time? None being said, we'll make that an action item next time.
Mr. Chair, do we want to, Mr. Morgan mentioned price points, and we really haven't received a lot of input on that, and it may mean that what we've proposed is acceptable. I just wanted to call that out since Mr. Morgan said one of the things we would need to determine is the price points on these, and that we did include a reference to 3022, which is our sort of our fees regulation. Don't know if you want to bring that up.
I'd address that to the Colonel. I'd address that to the Colonel. Do you want to discuss that?
If you would like me to read the proposals into the record today, and so that anybody listening or joining would have those numbers that
Sure.
they're proposed.
Yeah, I think for clarity that'll help. Let me move out of the way. You need to.
No, I have it in front of me, sir. The discussion item today on the non-resident bear chase permits, the proposals are, for discussion, bear chase permit non-resident $50, resident $30. Youth bear chase permit $15 for non-resident, resident would be $10. And a youth bear permit would be non-resident $100, a resident $10. Other permit prices for comparison are listed below there in the graph, but those are just for comparison permits.
So the goal is, in terms of setting these hypothetical prices or proposed prices, is to try to look at, for example, deer permits and elk permits and existing bear permits, and try to come up with like a comparable, reasonable figure, looking at what we currently offer or charge in light of those other species. And so that's the reason we arrived at those proposed price points. So welcome any feedback. If you all have any, we have not received any from stakeholders. You all may or may not have, but they seem to be reasonable or not objectionable, since we haven't received any feedback, but you may before next meeting.
Well, I would go, hang on, Paul, you're recognized now.
In our last meeting, we asked the department to look at, and this was just a discussion point, to look at the bear chase permit, which was discussed at one point as being eliminated, but now we're not, several years ago. And the bear permit, to see if you bought both, if there was a combo package to help on that pricing. And that's just a discussion point that you all can look at.
And the addition to the sportsman's tax.
Mr. Schwallace, you're recognized.
So the price comparison on bear permits in other states are $250, and we only want to charge $50?
That's our state.
That's our state.
That's our state?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Any further comments or questions about that?
You don't chase trout, do you?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question? So that discussion on this will all be part of the moving on. Okay.
That's why I wanted to recognize the Colonel, to make sure he's got that included in whatever he wants to do next time as an action item.
All right.
I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
If you're concerned with out-of-state hunters harvesting too many bears, is there a way that we could make the chase permit just chase? Not.
It is now.
It is.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Barton.
Can I speak?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
It is now. They have, the reg reads, and correct me if I'm wrong, Colonel, they have the right to harvest a bear, but to harvest a bear, you've got to have a chase permit first. And presently, they can't buy a chase permit, so it's a de facto way of keeping them out. But once we let them have the out-of-state permit to chase, then there's nothing to stop them from getting a tag to harvest, correct?
Correct.
And what we're talking about is letting them come in and get the chase permit, which actually lets them have both.
Mr. Chairman, I made one quick comment.
Yes, go ahead.
Just one point of clarification to augment what Mr. Morgan was saying, and that is, we have some people who participate in chase who are not interested in harvesting a bear.
Exactly.
So this also allows the differentiation or potential combo of the chase and a harvest permit or a bear permit, would allow for people to be on a cast with dogs, observe, participate in the chase aspect without necessarily harvesting, or they could have both permits to be able to harvest if the season allows for that.
And if I may, the reason for the chase permit for everyone in the cast is what our officers have repeatedly asked, is that, we get asked that question by our Bear Hunters Association and then the officers are continually, when they encounter a cast, they want to be certain that everybody that's out of the vehicles, out in the cast, going through the woods, following the dogs, are permitted, because they're participating by the definitions of our chapter. The definition of take includes the word pursue, and that group is pursuing, and that's why we define it as they do need it. But we want to be very clear that our language requires it, so that no one's out there without it and then is erroneously or made a mistake, and then they get cited by one of my officers because the facts are that they are pursuing by our definition of take, and that would be a requirement to have that permit. We just want to be very clear. So the idea, and that's why on the agenda it says to clarify, and that's the thing. We believe it's that way now. We just are trying to say everybody should understand bullet point 3 there, clarify. And basically bullet point 2 specify that all participants in the chase shall have the permit. And that's what the officers in the area are asking, because it's difficult to determine, there's one gun and 5 in a group. Everybody needs a permit. Only the person with the rifle or the mechanism to take would be the one that would need the harvest permit. You have to kind of envision the process of what they're actually doing. They cast the dogs. They follow the dogs to the tree where it's bayed to bear. And the parties in the group all need a permit, everyone. The harvester needs a harvest permit. But there could be as many as a larger lot than that going out through the woods, right, Mr. Morgan? I mean, wouldn't there be as many as, groups of 10?
I'd say that's possible.
Yeah. So we think that everyone in the group, because they are, by our definitions, completing the act of take, which is defined as pursue or attempt to pursue.
I don't think
it's our definitions that push us into this. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Any other questions for the Colonel or for Dr. Hass? Thank you. Then we'll pass that on. If there are no objections, we'll pass that on to an action item, and you will clear up, Colonel. You'll clear up any ambiguities or any problems that they have.
Yes, sir. I wrote down the combo permits, and then the main thing that I noticed there was the sportsman's license, adding to that. If that might be something, a different discussion. But
that's all discussion.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Colonel.
Yes, sir.
The next discussion item is clarify the definition of baiting of wild turkeys. That's attachment D1. That should be page 15, gentlemen. And I guess we have Ben Robinson back with the Colonel too. So
yes, the Colonel and I will tackle this one together.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
Sort of a wildlife and law enforcement suggestion. Clarifying the definition of baiting for turkeys. And really this, I don't want to speak for the Colonel, but this is probably more of an enforcement issue than it is a wildlife issue. I know his officers have a difficult time sometimes, and we, as biologists and field staff, have a difficult time answering questions about how far can I hunt turkeys from bait in the fall, because there's obviously a lot of bait on the ground with deer hunting and whatnot. So this is an attempt to clear that up by specifying a set distance of 600 feet from bait for hunting wild turkeys in the fall. The one thing I think that remains in question and that I've received questions on is how to address property lines in a regulation like this. It does get a little contentious when, if I'm hunting on my farm and the neighbor, maybe I know or maybe I don't know, has bait over there, does that make me ineligible to hunt on my own property? So that's, I think, something that we do need to clarify.
Have at it. Mr. Chairman.
Colonel, did you want to say something right after that, or can I go ahead with a question or two?
Go right ahead, Mr. Robinson.
Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
As he stated, the number one thing that's been brought to my attention is the property lines. Even some of the COs have brought that to my attention. Especially with small farms up in northeastern Kentucky where I'm at, it would be possible for one person to shut down 2 or 3 places. The way they border, he could put a feeder there and stop everybody from turkey hunting in 3 or 4 farms around him. So I don't know how that's going to work. So it's the only concern I've heard about baiting them. Nobody thinks that's a good idea.
Right, it is, and we realize that we would never, basically someone that didn't agree with your hunting practices could impede your ability to hunt, and that's the property line is a hard stop. I think there's no way for us to get around. I can't tell my neighbor what to do on his farm, and he can't tell me what to do on mine. And our department, again, back to my previous statement on the drones, we only regulate the hunting. We don't regulate the farming or whatever else is going on, feeding or whatever. Well, we do regulate that, I guess. But my point is, the hunting, you're responsible for your property. And I think that's the model that we've talked about on this is, it's the guy that's got the corn feeder out for his deer, and he sits up and hunts turkeys under it. That's what we're trying to talk about here. And that's why it's a discussion item. But I think when Director Robinson and I discussed this over and over with the officers and with his staff, that's the thing we don't want is the people to get in their deer stand and shoot turkeys under their corn feeder just because they come into it. So if they're 600 feet away, and I mean that number is a number that we looked at. Major Carrier, who's behind me, did research with some of the other states that had taken these steps already. Many times all of the states are following model legislation, and Major Carrier's welcome to speak on the number of states that he contacted and looked into that had modeled after that 500, 600-foot model, and I know Director Robinson and I both talked about it. And it's hard to step off. Are we going to pull a tape measure 600 feet? I mean, it's trying to, I've read some Florida cases recently where they prosecuted for this very thing, and they used a laser rangefinder to try to determine distances, and we're trying to find our way forward. But I think that we have many sportsmen that are very much will comply with the regulations that you all put in place. And what we know is when you make a regulation, many of our sportsmen just want to follow the rules. So by saying it and then allowing us something that we can enforce is a step forward to allowing this to, or prohibiting this hunting under a feeder, because it's only for fall, and I always say that over and over and over again, because we don't bait in the spring. It's illegal to put out corn in the spring. So this particularly is that fall season, back to fall turkeys that, biologists just sat up here and talked about was a small number of harvest anyway. But we're trying to do what we can to protect our turkeys, and we want to make sure that if anybody is taking them, they're taking them with true fair chase as required in the spring season. That's pretty concise. Yes, sir.
Questions, gentlemen? No other questions about that? If there are none, are there any objections to moving this item on to an action item next time? If there are none, we'll move that to an action item. The next discussion item is expansion of falconry waterfowl hunting opportunities. That's attachment D2, gentlemen, in your packet. Dr. John Brunges is going to present that, I believe. Or Ben, both of you all?
Yeah,
or you just here?
And if there's any questions or conversation, Dr. Brunges is here to help us answer.
Okay, good.
So,
good. Sure. So we got you both.
Essentially, this is just providing more opportunity to falconers is what this boils down to. We're proposing to extend the end of falconry season from February 15th to the last Sunday of February. And Dr. Brunges has reviewed all of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service framework. It fits fine within that, what the structure does. So it's really just about providing more opportunity to falconers.
How many falconers do we have? Do you know?
I don't know offhand. It's a fairly small number.
John, do you know?
My take is less than 10.
Less than 10 that actually hunt.
That hunt waterfowl that have falcons that hunt. It's a very small number. It's in a different program. And I'm here because it falls under waterfowl regs, but falconry is not really in my program. But it's a very small number of folks who do it.
And we can get that exact number.
And a sidebar, I would encourage sportsmen across the street, across the state, to look up the plans of how to make kestrel boxes. I have 2 up, and I sit on my back porch and watch the kestrels suspend themselves up in the air and hunt for mice in the field behind my house. It's fun to watch. So for you sportsmen, it doesn't take long, build you a couple of kestrel boxes and put them up and watch the kestrels. It's a lot of fun. Any questions or any comments that you all have for either John or Mr. Robinson?
I have one. I don't know anything about falconry. I don't know anything about that. Do you have to buy a permit to do that? Is that a special permit?
You have to be licensed.
You have to be a licensed falconer.
You do.
And there's less than 10 of them?
I can go back and get the exact number for you, but it's a small
about
number.
10.
It's a small number.
I would say falconry that hunts waterfowl.
Oh, I see.
So that's somebody with a peregrine or a gyrfalcon or something. Those are really a specialized person. There are quite a bit more that hunt rabbits or hunt squirrels or hunt with like a red-tailed hawk or with a kestrel or with something else.
So there's more permits.
I would say
Oh, yes, there's more than 10 across the state. There's probably licensed falconers, but
It's still a small, select group. It's a hard, they have to go through an apprenticeship. They have to have special, people come inspect their where they keep the birds and that kind of thing. So it's a long, slow process. We have a great falconry association in Kentucky. I know they recently had an event here at headquarters to let people come out and see birds fly and try to recruit new people. They're very passionate, but still a fairly small group.
Well, that's amazing, I think.
It's neat to watch.
Any further questions or comments about expansion of falconry waterfowl?
Comment?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Tyler Rankin approached me about this. He's the president of the United Falconry Association of Kentucky. And it is a small group that does the duck hunting per se, but the falconry is a pretty neat sport and a tradition in the state, and I think that it's cool to give them an opportunity to hunt ducks longer, especially if it's not going to cause any additional.
The impact on populations is absolutely minimal. We would give them more days, but it's with the Fish and Wildlife Service, we're allowed to hunt any species 107 days over the course of a year. And so when you add our 60-day duck season and our September days and all those things together, this is the max we can give them. And be, some years with calendar shifts, it changes. Some days it's 102 or 3 or 4. But to come up with a consistent ending for them, that last Sunday in February is the best we can do for them.
Good. Thank you, gentlemen. If there are no objections, we'll move the expansion of falconry waterfowl hunting season on to action item next time. Are there any objections to that? If there are none, then that'll be moved to an action item. Our next discussion item is remove requirements for sandhill crane hunters to use metal tags. I guess this time, John, it's you, or both of you.
Ben's still presenting. I'm just here for
Okay,
questions.
go ahead, Ben.
I'm happy to hand it over.
Yeah, either way you want to do it.
And
That's page 17, gentlemen.
could help us with this too if Colonel Gibson's not in. But so essentially this one is trying to simplify things for our sandhill crane hunters. Right now there is a requirement to tag cranes upon harvest. However, I think the material, John, correct me if I'm wrong, the material is not specified. Right now, since our season inception, we've always required a metal leg tag. The problem with those really comes with kind of the administration of those tags, mailing them out. Sometimes they get lost in the mail. A lot of times when folks have to take their hunter identification, crane identification tests, they wait until the night before they hunt to take that. Well, then we obviously can't get them the tags mailed to them. So we're proposing to simplify that by allowing them to print off their tags when they're able to buy their crane permit.
So that tag would have to be with them at the time they take the bird from the field. So they're going to attach it around the leg or put it in a plastic bag,
Correct.
attach it
Yes.
before they move the bird, right? So they got to have that with them. They can't take the bird home and then put the tag on.
By federal law, they still have to tag it before it's moved. It's just, if you could print, when you print your permit out, if it had 2 tags on the side that you could cut out, it just saves a lot of, I don't know, 30 to 50 phone calls we get a year.
Just
somebody, I've lost my tags. I can't find them. You haven't sent them to me. Whatever. It would really clean that up for a lot of people.
Just as an informational update, was the harvest down this year?
It was
weather-wise
actually a little higher than
it was.
Yeah, it was. We don't shoot a lot of cranes. But 100 is our kind of a normal number, and we were a little over that this year. But it's just weather driven, and the birds. In the 10 years we've been doing this, the migration patterns have changed. They don't come south as early as they used to. So in Barren River Lake, and whether or not its water levels are high, greatly impact our amount of harvest. So across the board, Tennessee and Alabama also hunt cranes. They were down this year. As a flyway, the harvest was definitely down this year.
Any questions, comments about sandhill crane tagging? Then, if there are no objections, we'll move that on to an action item next time. So, the next discussion item is really an informational update about big game spring turkey season. So, I'm skittish about anything that has to do with turkeys today. So, I hope this informational update is just that, an informational update.
New roast, nice work. Back there, you guys see? All right. So yeah, they asked me just to do a quick update. So this will be deer, elk, and bear update, basically from last fall, our harvest. We'll talk about a couple things, working on some elk habitat, a couple things about CWD as we go through this. We'll jump right into deer as we start. So 2021-22 deer season, total harvest was right around 132,000. That's down just slightly. So it's about 5.6% below the 10-year average. And you can see that we've got, basically starting here about 2012, pretty much this calm little roller coaster where things go up and down naturally. I definitely felt more tied into deer season. I typically go hunt the weekend, but given that we spent all 16 days in West Kentucky sampling deer, I really felt tuned into what days were good. You were busy on the good days. The hunters were killing deer. You were going to be busy all day. Plus, we were driving, sunrise and sunset times, and you could tell when you needed to slow down and not do some inadvertent sampling with the work truck on the way home. So we had some weather days for sure during our modern gun season that contributed to that reduction. One thing that I was very encouraged about was our antlered male harvest. So this is plotted since 2000. And you can see over here, again, starting about 2012, we kind of took that jump up and we've remained relatively stable since. A few things that explain that coming into this next graph that I also like. So this is the breakdown in total male harvest by year going back to 2016. One thing to point out that we'll see is that, percent adult male in the harvest has steadily ticked up over the last couple of years, which is good. Maybe one of two things. Hunters are being more selective, or secondly, there's just more adult bucks out there due to being, hunters being selective in the past. The other thing we're seeing down here, the orange and the blue bars at the bottom, so that's your yearling male in orange and your male fawn in blue. Those are slowly ticking down, which is great. Our hunters are selecting for older age class bucks, which is, one of kind of the basic tenets of trophy deer management. So that's all encouraging to see. So to kind of segue right into CWD, so last year statewide, we sampled about 7,500 deer, about 55 elk, didn't detect CWD anywhere in the state last year. Specific to our CWD surveillance zone in West Kentucky, so of those 7,500 deer, 4,300 of them came from 5 counties in West Kentucky. Again, didn't detect any CWD. So that was a very intensive sampling effort, that I think we can all definitely be proud of down there. It definitely gave us a leg up going into the future in terms of kind of setting the groundwork for super intensive sampling one year. We can make some changes for the next, and I'll talk about those quickly. So we're going to keep our 5-county zone and all the restrictions that were in place last year, such as baiting and feeding, the carcass carcass transportation issues. We got great data on what were our hot check stations and what kind of were the duds, and we were able to move a couple around. So we actually are going to reduce check stations from 17 to 13. This is all to be more efficient with our staff time, all the while making it not that burdensome on hunters. Additionally, we're gonna lessen the days that we've got a mandatory check requirement. So we're going to focus on the weekends of modern gun season. So we're going to be Saturday through Monday of opening weekend in November, Saturday through Monday of the second weekend, and just Saturday and Sunday. So that would be the last weekend of modern gun season. We also know during the busy times and spending time at these check stations, we're reducing the hours. So we're cutting an hour off the morning and an hour off the evening. That'll make it a little more tolerable. People won't have to get up as early and they won't be out as late, and I think we can still accommodate all those hunters. We will additionally have freezer locations in the surveillance zone, but also across the rest of the state. Those will all be online once we get that sorted out. And one thing that I really want to key into, we seem like we're lessening these mandatory checks, but we found an opportunity with our taxidermists and processors where we're going to have technicians and local staff essentially tied in with those people throughout deer season. So, a certain subset of people, we're going to take their deer to a processor, a certain group, we're going to take them to a taxidermist. Those are, the low-hanging fruit that we can pluck out without them really having to do anything different than they would. So, going into 2022, I think we really keyed in on efficiency. I wouldn't be surprised if we really sample many less than we did this past year with this system. So,
John, may I interject one thing?
Yeah.
I know Commissioner Storm, through Chairman Kleiner, wanted to give a shout out to all staff for just continuing to do an excellent job. And I just want to say publicly here, we had, I think, like 200 of our staff, and we have about 500 full-time and grant-funded staff. Were over involved in this, and some for the entire deer season last year. I mean, John and Gabe and others, and many forfeited their opportunity to gun hunt. And so this reducing down the burden on staff will be a relief to many staff, but also just want to give them a shout out and say thanks for the tremendous effort for sampling this last year.
Absolutely. Thank you. So that essentially covers deer. If you've got any questions about kind of the CWD plans for next year, feel free to holler at myself or Chrissy, and we can bring you up to speed on that one. Shifting over a little bit to elk, just quickly looking at the number of elk permits we've got. I got this slide in here basically to say that we've had 594 total permits since 2019. So going into this 2022 season will be 4 years with similar, basically identical, number of tags and other regulations. So a lot of the numbers that we're going to look at are going to go back to 19 because that's the best. That's kind of the best set of years that we can compare. Elk applications by year. I love this graph. I mean, it has gone straight up and is kind of floating around. 2020 being a really high year, we're just slightly off of that, but we're still up there above 90,000 individual permits. So the other graphic that I've got on this slide is the odds of drawing a tag. And I will tell you that all the stuff that we're going to see for elk is actually up online in our 2021 elk report. We do one of those every year and get all this information out to our hunters or anybody interested. But, we always hear that, drawing an elk tag is Powerball odds. Powerball odds are like 1 in 700 million. So even a bull tag, this 1 in 175 is astronomically better than winning the Powerball. So, it's not bad odds at all. And down here at youth, 1 in 54. I think that's a great opportunity for our youth. I've already talked to a bunch of excited youth hunters this year that we're drawing. So moving through harvest. Harvest is essentially followed as our available elk tags have been reduced. Our harvest has been reduced subsequently. We're still seeing really the highest component of harvest coming from our cow firearm season. Which makes sense given the number of tags that are available for that season. So the chart that, I think we talked about this at the Elk Guides meeting a week or two ago. This is essentially what I'm looking at. This is 19, 20, and 21 this is the magic success rate chart. So kind of the top row of our highlighted numbers, these are the 594 general draw tags that I've also included our late season tags in there. Starting in 2021, we no longer have a late season hunt, so you'll see that over there. Our other permits, so our commission, our landowner, our voucher tags, our elk restoration permits are down here at the bottom, so that's your second row of highlighted numbers. Those are a little bit higher because those are landowner tags that are on an area. A lot of our herb tags are on private property that there might not otherwise be any hunting on, so they tend to be a little bit higher. Overall success rate, so 2019 it was 40%, so that was our first year of the new either sex archery tag, which had a little bit of a learning curve. That improved for 2020 and stayed relatively the same for 2022, 2021. So our overall success rate last year was 45%.
So that's your question, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
On the, has it been 20 years now since this program started?
Yeah.
I had a guy call me. He said he's been in there since the very beginning, and he's never, he's participated, but he's never been drawn. He wanted to know if there's some kind of way that people who've done it for 20 times or 20 years, if they would be put in a separate section where they don't have to compete against somebody just coming into it.
Yeah, we've got that coming down the pipe, the loyalty redraw. So it'll basically be a separate So for unbought tags, it'll go to those people that I think, what were we at, 19? Should be at 20 years after this year.
Yes.
So there will be a pool of those people that have in fact put in every year that will get those unbought tags.
Has anybody had one twice, maybe?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So the odds are essentially reset every year. So you've got no, when you additively, yes, it's astronomical odds to say draw 3, but they're reset every year. There's no, having a previous elk tag doesn't influence your odds.
We have to set out.
When we have a set out period. So 3 years.
3 years.
Yep.
3 years.
Yep, 3 years for both tag types. That's changed. That's been adjusted recently. So it is possible. I talked to plenty of people that have not drawn. And luckily we've got, I guess we put that through September last year. Yep, so that'll be coming down the pipe for next year.
We hope that to be in effect. It's called loyalty redraw. We hope it to be in effect next fall. We anticipate it will be. So those who applied the longest number of consecutive years are going to go into a separate drawing for leftover permits, which usually is about 10% of the total number of permits. So if it stays at that number, we'd have about 50 to 60 leftover permits at the end of the purchase period. And then, so that 50 or 60 permits would be a secondary drawing for people who applied all 21 to 22 years.
So how many did we have? We looked at that.
Going into this year was 75.
So 75 people have applied every year without fail. So if we have 50, then those 75 people are going to be eligible for those 50 over.
Odds go way up there.
Odds going to go way up.
And one person was drawn this year, so it's 74.
That's true. We did.
Right.
One that we know of, maybe more. I'm not sure.
Could have. Yeah. So that's coming down the pipe. I think that'll help. Encourage people that have put in all those years.
I'm sure they'll be glad to hear that.
Jumping forward, just wanted to briefly hit the McCreary County elk relocation project that we did this winter. So by the time the winter was over, I know there was a lot of to do about having the helicopter here. We moved 36 over that we caught with the helicopter, and later off a alfalfa field that we were having some nuisance issues in. We moved another 7 later on. The winter blurs together, but I think that was towards the middle of February. All of them were taken to the same release site on Beaver Creek WMA. Currently, we've got 41 alive. So I'm talking about our 2 mortalities just to highlight the fact that anytime you move animals, both of these, it was strange. It wasn't what I was expecting. They fell off a cliff. They were living in places with more cliffs than you're going to find at Beaver Creek, yet they go over there and fall off a cliff. So neither one of them was, one of them was almost a week after release. She had plenty of time to figure the thing out and still fell off a cliff. So it just highlights the fact that anything that can happen when you're, doing an activity like this, moving that over there. So we've got 41 down there that are alive and kicking right now. I'll just show you a close-up map, and I'm sure you can't see this real good. This is about a week's worth of data from actually right in the middle of turkey season, which there were people on there hunting turkeys. But where you see these clustered pins are the food plot areas on Beaver Creek. I'm calling them food plots because that's what they are, but they're open lands areas on Beaver Creek that were a major driving force for us putting them there. There was green food in there in the winter. They took to those very quickly and have continued to utilize them as an important food source. And then I want to give a shout out to the Beaver Creek staff and Mike Strunk and his guys in the southeast. They have absolutely, gotten to it, and we've got about 30 open areas that are in Eagle Ford soybeans. So basically it was described to me as that the elk don't stay on Beaver Creek, they're silly. So those guys have been out getting these things planted. We want to put a good buffet out for them. We want them to stick in the area. We want to give them the most nutritious thing that we can, just to get every advantage we can to build this population as quickly as possible. So overall, I think early on it's a success, but we're monitoring it. We've got 33 collars on those elk down there, and see what they're doing every day. We'll keep an eye on things. One other point on elk, our East Kentucky Habitat Initiative. So we talked a little bit about CWD. This was really wanting to get this kicked off about last September, and we got busy with the other end of the state down in West Kentucky. So I think we met for the first time on this maybe the week before Christmas, and we're still able to knock down a couple hurdles and put about 1,000 acres of fire on the ground. This specific picture's from Paul Van Boeven at the elk viewing area. We've got a wonderful field of native grass up right now, and we actually killed that autumn olive. So that's about the last autumn olive in that field, but it's no longer. So you can see we have burned in the east, a decent amount over the years, up to 700 acres. So we ended up doing about 1,115 acres this year in 2022, split between kind of the Breathitt County area and Bell County down on Boone Forest lands. This is a particularly big unit down on Boone Forest lands that we're burning up. And it's not a simple process to burn on that. You've got mine permits, you've got everything in private ownership. People have different feelings about setting a big fire on their property. And the number one goal right now is to set back autumn olive. That's really what the big issue is. Jacob Stewart, our private lands coordinator, this is actually fresh off the press yesterday. We've lost about half of our open land since 2001. And all that is due to autumn olive. I think we'll have some maps and something to show here at some point, but it went from about 500,000 acres to about 250,000 acres, 2001 to 2019. So, that's 3 years ago, so we've lost more of that. So it's imperative that we're doing something, especially on these areas. I'm going to end before we jump to bears with this photo. So you got Joe McDermott on the left lighting up a unit. This is actually down on Boone Forest lands. We've got Cody Roden, our small game coordinator, with a successfully harvested turkey from just to the left of where Joe's standing. I put that in there to highlight the fact that this is not just an elk initiative. Turkeys were in this place heavily, elk, deer. Cody was hearing quail. We flushed quail while we were burning the area. We flushed grouse while we were burning the area. The main thing, looking here in the background, you see a little bit of green on that one, but he's just barely holding on. That is dead autumn olive. And so when we can get autumn olives with spacing such that there's grass fuel underneath them, we can really manage them with fire. So we started immediately after, that was actually the last fire we did. The photo of Cody there is about 3 weeks post-fire, so you can see that it's right back green. We immediately started on what we're going to do next year. So we've got about a 3,000 acre goal for next year that I think we can hit. Got one slide on bears and I'll be done. This is kind of one of our harvest graphs where there's really not much of a roller coaster to it. It's just since about 16, 17 has been on this nice steady increase. So every one of, each of those years, as you guys know, we adjusted bear quotas, we adjusted bear zones, we did something to incrementally increase harvest. And that graph right there proves that that's what we did. So going forward with some of these other regs and things that we're thinking about, my goal is to continually step that up slowly. I think that's the best way to manage our bears, to put something in place, to evaluate it for a year or two before we make another change, and just slowly walk this thing up and, both manage our bears and also give our hunters opportunity. Another thing that I want to highlight is this percent female in the harvest. It's been steadily going down, which is great. We can afford to kill a lot more males than we can females, whether it's hunter education, whether they're able to tell that male bear from a female, or if it's just happenstance. It's an encouraging statistic. The lower that percent female is in the harvest, the more we can afford to take off the landscape each year. So with that, I will happily take any questions. As I mentioned, our elk report's up online. The deer report should be later this week. And as always, shout at me if any questions pop up.
Questions? Go ahead, Doug.
Are we going to be receiving all that information to the commissioners?
Yeah, we can certainly send you those reports.
Text message, send it to us.
Sure. Yep.
John, I want to say on behalf of the commission, I know that didn't take 20 minutes to get that presentation together, so thank you for getting that information together. It's not only informative to the commission, but it's also informative to sportsmen who will be calling these gentlemen, wondering what that I see a head over there, so yep, they'll be calling to find out what this information is, and to go a little further with, will you supply us that information? Will it be online for them to look at again?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So you sportsmen out there who want to look back at this, it will be available online through the department to find out the harvest numbers. So thank you for going to that much trouble to both present it to us and to present it to sportsmen across the state. And I'm sure they like the commission members like the fact that that'll eliminate a few phone calls because we get lots of them.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that on the 10-year deer harvest, on the average, we're down a tad this year. Are you attributing most of that to the CWD zone?
No, I don't think so. The CWD zone was down a little bit, and I think that had some impact down there, but that was 5 counties. You know, maybe it's influencing the area west of the lakes, but that's still a tiny portion of the state. So I think a lot of it is weather, just the fluctuations that we see on an annual basis.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Next informational update is on WMA tiering. Ben, is that you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Ben's busy.
Spring turkey. You want to do spring turkey first?
Yep, spring turkey. Thank you for calling attention to it.
Zach, get you back.
Sorry, Zach.
He's wanting to get away from his turkey.
Yeah, I'm gun shy of turkeys today. Thank you, Zach.
All right, I'll try to be quick.
Thank you all for calling my attention.
Sure. Next slide, Kate. So as we mentioned earlier, just shy of 27,000 birds telechecked this spring. So overall, 8% down from last year and 11% down from the 5-year average. I should have scooted that red box over one more year to include 2017. 2022 is being compared to the previous 5 years. So we're down a little bit from that 5-year average. Next slide. So breaking it down a little bit, residents account for the vast majority of turkeys harvested, so the change from last year was the same as overall. Non-residents were up 10% from last year. Non-residents account for a relatively small number of the turkeys taken overall. Youth, really no different than last year, but down from the recent year average. And our landowner license exempt folks were down about 10%. Next slide. The percentage of hunters that fill their 2-bird statewide bag limit is down about 9%. And jakes in the harvest. Okay, let me explain this one. So jakes account for the past several years have accounted for about 9 to 13% of all the turkeys taken. This year they accounted for 19%. That's an 81% increase from last year and a 61% increase over the past 5 years. So one clarification, this doesn't mean that we're wiping out the jake crop that would become next year's gobblers. As a game bird biologist, I like to see fairly high juveniles in the harvest because to a certain extent, large extent, it reflects how many jakes are out there. And so you see a jake come by your setup very many times, it's hard to hold off. I can attest to that. So next slide, please. Sorry for the repeat on that. Youth, the next one. Okay, so opening weekend, this is important. We're down 16% on opening weekend. Opening weekend accounts for 30 to 35% of all the turkeys taken. This year we were down 16%. What happened on opening weekend? Easter Sunday. Right. Okay, so keep that in mind. Weekends generally were down, although not as much. We made up some ground in the second and third weekends. Weekdays down as well, but there's more people back to work. It's COVID recovery, so that's perhaps part of it. Private land, again, the vast majority of turkeys taken, all private land, down 8%, same as statewide average. But we were, next slide, also down a little bit on public land. On average, across commission districts, down 8%. Okay, that ranged from as high as 15% in the 9th, next slide, Gabe, to 2%, I think, 1 or 2% in the 6th district. So, yeah, you can see on the biggest drops were in the 7th, 8th, and 9th districts. From looking at the rightmost bar for 2022, you see the drop. The 6th district and 5th district gave in the second row, very little change overall. And then the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, kind of in between. All right, next slide, Gabe. So this map shows the number of turkeys checked per county. Darker, warmer colors mean more turkeys, and the lighter colors mean fewer turkeys. And the heavy black lines denote commission district boundaries.
So you can quickly scan across and look at the relative numbers of dark to light counties. And this basically is similar to how harvest works out every year. We have a lot more turkeys taken in the western counties because they're bigger land area. Next slide. And this top 5 counties here. All right, so this map shows the change from the 5-year average. And also note that the heavy black lines are now breaking the state up into thirds, west, central, and east. And I'll be doing that for a reason to be explained in the next slide. But down 4% in the west, 9% in central, and 18% in the east. See a lot more, the warmer colors are greater percentage declines. The yellows to the green, cooler colors are stable to increasing.
Which county is that?
What is that? Oldham County, yeah. So, yeah. All right, so here's my link. The reason I split it up into thirds, the map, because when we do our annual turkey brood survey, we analyze the results for that in thirds across the state based on the sample size that we get. All right, so this is overall, this is our trend in poults per hen going back to 2005. So the first thing you notice, if you look at the rightmost dot there, we had a big jump last summer, which is a good thing. Remember talking about all those jakes? That's where the jakes were born that got hunted this spring. Okay, advanced gate. But here's a big part of the decrease, I believe. Between 2019 and 2020, our hatch dropped. We had a poor hatch in 2020 overall. So I believe that accounts for part of the decrease in harvest. Next gate. So this just shows in western Kentucky, we had a sizable drop in the hatch in 2020. Central Kentucky, not as bad. Eastern Kentucky, a big drop as well. Okay. So again, lower production of poults in 2020 probably explains some of the decreased harvest in 2022 because those birds advanced to become adult gobblers. Next gate. But this is a big one to keep in mind. This is license sales from the beginning of the license year through the end of turkey season. Okay? Down 7% this year from last year. And how much? Next slide, Gabe. Keep in mind, harvest is down 8%. So this probably has a lot to do with the drop as well. Next slide. And this shows hunter effort. So folks who check the bird online provide us with this data, how many days it took folks to harvest the turkey. And so even though our total number of birds taken this year was less, folks, look at the 2021 and 2022, basically there's no change. That's what those error bars indicate within the margin of error. So we were just as efficient at taking turkeys this year as we were last year. We just took fewer. But we mentioned Easter. There was weather factors. We'll touch again on that in a second. Next slide. With the help of Deputy Commissioner Clark, whose expertise in survey software, we are in the process of conducting a postseason turkey hunter survey. So just to report on some of the preliminary findings, we'll have a complete report once it's finished, but a significant percentage of hunters who killed just one turkey said they did that, they stopped harvesting their first bird because they were concerned about turkey numbers. So these are people willingly holding back. If you'll remember back, I said we had a drop in the percentage of successful hunters that killed 2 birds. Okay. Substantial percentages said that their hunting time was impacted by one of several factors: bad weather, holidays, Easter being big, and Mother's Day at the very last day of the season. And again, concern about turkey numbers and things like fuel prices. So we have, again, indications that people didn't hunt as hard or as much this year. And lastly, a higher percentage said they hunted less this year than last year compared to those who said they hunted more this year than last year. All right, real quickly, just to touch on, give you some quick results on the first season of banding for our turkey gobbler banding research. Next, Gabe. Overall, we captured almost 250 birds, but 236 legal to take birds. The others were some hens that we took blood samples from, but 236 gobblers and males altogether. Next, Gabe. But breaking it down by age class, gobblers, of the 125 that we banded, 34 were returned. That works out to a 27% return rate, or what eventually, when the study's finished, will be our estimate for harvest rate. But again, this is first year, 27%. Jake's much lower, okay, 4%. And Gabe, one more. We did ban 3 bearded hens, very small percentage, but didn't harvest them. So I will say that current thinking in turkey management right now is that you get too far north of 30% of gobblers taken, that's potential danger zone for pressure over harvest potentially. But this is the first year, we didn't exceed that. Certainly there's variation across the state, we broke things out, but it's the first year of data. So again, the research that you approved is very important for getting at exactly the concerns that our sportsmen have. So, and I got to have a big shout out to our staff. Tremendous effort. Catching turkeys is hard, period. When you're focusing on gobblers, it's especially hard. We did tremendous across the state, and that's coming off the heels of all the time spent on CWD, and then they're quickly, on to their spring tasks. So I can't thank the landowners who allowed us access. Okay, so that's all I got. Any questions?
Boy, thank you for that informational update. That's as before, that's extremely important to the sportsmen for them to be able to obtain that information. So thank you very much. Jerry, go ahead.
This won't take long. I got some feedback from Scott County and Estill County, and they were explaining to me that their numbers are extremely low, and it's been on a steady decline. Estill County being on the map there, was on the right side of Madison. Has it always been that way? Because they said we don't know what happened.
Yeah, well, the trend in poults per hen, that reproduction, in my mind, is really behind that. Okay, so we've had steadily decreasing reproduction in Eastern Kentucky. Scott County, I don't have fine enough data for that county particularly, but that county is, it's growing leaps and bounds in terms of development. So that's to be expected to a certain extent. 10, 15 years ago, we were, they would have been hunting fields that are now subdivisions. So I'm not saying that's the only reason the population's down, but those two counties are very different in terms of the pressures on the population.
You wouldn't think Estill would have that much pressure.
Well, it's in that there. I think that's reflective of poor reproduction. Again, you've got to have good hatches to refuel the population, and we just haven't seen that. And that's not just Estill. That's a lot of Eastern Kentucky. Those counties that had a bigger decrease this year, I think, is reflective of fewer turkeys in some of those mountain counties.
Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Do you think that the reason why the non-resident harvest was up is due to those people that come here from out of state hunt on a lot of times leased property with a guide?
It's possible, yeah. If you're investing time to come here, then you want to be as successful. They may be services of a guide. They're probably more experienced turkey hunters, to come all the way here.
Was the COVID year taken out of that one? Because that data would be not reliable because we suspended in 2020, was it, all the sale of...
And the 5-year average, 2020 was about, I did not include it in the 5-year percentage comparison.
Paul, did you have something?
No, I was going to say 2020, we didn't allow non-resident to...
Right. We had the pleasure to work with some colleagues from other states on 2020 year COVID, hunting during the COVID year, basically, and we were one of the few states that limited, there was a handful across the country, the majority of states did not restrict non-resident hunters in their state. So it's an interesting breakdown we have to share with you if you're interested.
Zach, in the low producing poult years that you mentioned up here, do you have any information that shows that that's a trend in the southeast overall?
Yeah, there's.
So
it's well documented.
that's not just specific to Kentucky.
Correct. I can provide you a publication. It was probably, I think it's 2015, was published, and that paper showed data from Kentucky and the other southeastern states, and it showed decline in reproduction going all the way back to the, depends on the state, but 80s, 90s, we've seen a significant decline. But the one thing to keep in mind is that we declined a lot from turkey restoration days when we were releasing birds. It's come down, and after that, it varies by state. The deep southern states have seen continued decline. Our trend, if you look at it, at least since 2005, we've had a lot of bumps up and down, but it's not going straight down. It's just highly volatile, okay? And there's a lot of factors that go into it, but it's concerning, but we haven't lost our turkey populations. We just have to have a good hatch. Weather is a huge factor, and so it's going to vary from place to place.
So,
I'm sorry.
Well, to follow up with that, our general trends match generally what's happening overall in the southeastern United States.
Generally, but not at the rate.
Okay.
And I think that's got to be a product of our more conservative season. You know, we've had a lower bag limit, shorter season, and timing of that season it's very appropriate. We've been lucky to maintain a sensible, conservative turkey season for many years, and some of the other states that have seen a greater decline have had longer seasons, more generous bag limits, and they're making changes now, which are bringing them more in line with what we have always had. So perhaps that's buffered us to some degree.
Okay. Mr. Farrell, did you have something?
I was going to ask you, how much of it is predator related compared to the other states like Missouri and Georgia? I hear people talk about the decline, but every morning I'm up and I drive a school bus through Boone's Trace subdivision. A lot of times you can't drive your bus because of the turkey and the deer in that one area right there. But you go out to these farms and the farmers are saying that they're just not there. And so I just wonder, is it, like you said, the whole southeast? Is it predators?
Sure, yeah. I mean, most of turkey nest loss comes at the hands of predators. Now, I mean, that's no secret. That's always been the case. Everything likes to eat a turkey, and as long as there's been predators, they've got the turkey nest. Predator communities are pretty similar across the eastern U.S. nowadays. I mean, there's coyotes everywhere. There didn't used to be coyotes, but the coyotes don't take that greater percentage of adult birds. So that's one thing. Once you become an adult turkey, you can survive. Survival is actually relatively high. It is nest loss, loss of broods, and certainly that's predators. But the effectiveness of predators is going to be enhanced when you have a very limited habitat, poor quality habitat, and weather that makes it more conducive to using your scent and finding the nest. I have bird dogs. I like to hunt on days when it's moist, and my dogs are more effective at smelling. And so you have an interaction of factors. So yeah, it's predators, but it's always been predators. It's just that the key time of the year, right now. So when nests are hatching and you got poults on the ground, this is critical. Okay, that's why we talk about habitat, because turkeys live in a lot of different habitats, but right now they need habitat. Helps buffer us against that predation.
Zach, again, thank you to you and your staff for that hard work and that update, both for our benefit and the sportsman's benefit. Thank you very much, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
make one comment.
Mr. Chairman, will we be receiving that information to the commissioners as well?
Zach, will you make that information available to the commission? Can you send that electronically to the commission? And it will be posted also on the website, that information?
We can get that, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
I was just going to make a reference to Zach alluded to it, but the downtick in recruitment, reproduction, the poult survival, and so on back in 2020 is kind of a flip of this last year when we had really good numbers of poults or good numbers of birds being recruited. And this year we had, you all probably received them, lots of reports of jakes. Of course, we had a higher proportion of jakes in the harvest. Next year should be a tremendous number of 2-year-old birds out there in the land for people to harvest. So it should be a great season next year.
WMA tier update that I jumped to a minute ago. And you have a handout that you want to remind everybody. You should have a handout, gentlemen.
The reference there. Chairman, can I ask Ben a question before he gets started on the WMA hearing?
I guess so. Go ahead.
Can we get an update on the next meeting? I love the update on turkeys and big game. Can we get one about the change of regulation to the bobcats that we made with the extension of season back a week into deer season, and then also how much participation with the remission or submission of the jawbones, and do we get more jawbones? Are we getting enough data from that program, and how many sightings tags do we award for hunters and trappers?
Sure. Would you like me to present that at the meeting or just send that out as an informational package to you gentlemen?
I'd just like to see it all.
Send it.
Yeah, I'd say at this point, send it unless there's an issue that we need to readdress for an action item. So I'd just send it at this point.
Absolutely. Dave, will this advance the slide? Sure. Okay. So last presentation, and I'll make it brief, but this is our WMA tiering update that I'm really excited to finally be able to bring in front of everyone as we've about got this packaged up and polished up where we want it. As many of you recall, this has been in discussion for several years now, actually. It's been before the commission. The WMA working group has tackled this. The WMA working group then assigned a subgroup of key staff within the agency to start really putting the sideboards on this. So that's kind of what I'm going to deliver now, is where we're at through that process. Just to be clear, the intent of our wildlife management area tiering process is, number one, to help guide customers' expectations when they're choosing a WMA. I'll elaborate on that a little bit more as we go when I start explaining different levels. Two, to provide you gentlemen and agency leadership an ongoing picture of the vision, the cost, and the needs of current WMAs, and the key word there, new acquisitions. So as we continue to pursue new acquisitions for WMAs, this is good information to have on hand right up front. We can say, oh, this is going to be a tier 1, or we'll go with the naming structure. It's changed a little bit, but a tier 1. So we know up front when we're looking at acquiring a piece of property that if it's going to be a high level management area, it's going to require more resources. It's going to require more staff, more equipment, more funding. Versus if we're purchasing a piece of property that's maybe a lower level management option. It's more for access, but it's going to come at a reduced cost to the agency because we're not going to be managing it this intensely. And three, this is aimed at assisting our staff in prioritization of their management activities. Right now, one of our biggest challenges, we've got such a highly motivated staff, it's hard to keep them from wanting to bounce around to all of our areas and do a little bit of work on all of them. That's not always efficient when you have to load up equipment, trailer it across several counties. So this will help them prioritize their work and really focus in their efforts. So our tiering team that I alluded to, that was a group of key staff within the agency that have an intimate knowledge of our public lands. They work to categorize each area, and you have a spreadsheet there that lists our categories and what we've proposed for each area. But they base those decisions, one, on the management potential of that piece of property, two, the availability of staff that they have at their disposal to manage these properties, and three, the availability of equipment and other resources to help manage the properties. At the same time, as we were working through this, we worked with our internal communications team, and we sent out a survey to public lands users with a few questions on this and how they would like to approach it. When we first started this, and you've already heard me say tiering, because that's kind of ingrained in my mind, and I'm trying to get myself to stop saying that, but that didn't resonate very well with the public. The word tiering didn't. Instead, they preferred high management level, moderate management level, low management level, which is indicative of what we're trying to do. We're trying to categorize these based on the level of management that we're doing on each property. So a high management level WMA, if you step foot on this property, you're going to recognize active management. You see a photo of prescribed fire there. We're going to be doing strip disking, some trail maintenance, annual grain food plots, dove fields, just all the normal things that you would expect to see in a management regime. Typically, we have staff and equipment on site, office locations, and there either will be or currently is a long-term management plan associated with each of these areas. A moderate management level WMA is still going to receive some management, but it's going to be minimal. See in the photo there, we're doing some timber stand improvement, so it's a kind of a long-lived project that's may benefit the forest over multiple years, but you're probably not going to go see just a lot of active stuff when you step on that property. You may still see a dove field on these properties, but that will really be the probably extent of what you notice, more long-lived management activities. And last is going to be our low management level. You're not going to experience any active annual management on these properties. We don't have staff and equipment there. Many times they're remote. The terrain's a little harder to traverse. Still might do some long-lived practices like I showed on that last slide where we're doing a little bit of forest management here and there, but all in all, we're not going to be doing much management. However, I don't want folks to get discouraged about that. I've had a lot of folks actually tell me they're going to target this type of area because you can get off the grid and get away from people. Still wonderful access, still good populations of game, just not the active management there that you're going to see on the higher intensity areas. A couple of other areas that they're kind of outliers here, so they're off on their own, but a hunter access area. These are privately owned areas. We have access, we obtain access through lease agreements. Typically you'll see these more in eastern Kentucky, honestly, on the bigger corporate-owned land, mining operations, timberland, things like that. We don't have staff and equipment there, and we're not doing any active management unless something is built into the agreement up front. And then last, shooting sports and dog trial areas. While these are still WMAs, Curtis Gates Lloyd in northern Kentucky, Miller Welch Central near Berea, and West Kentucky WMA near Paducah, they're still WMAs. They still offer opportunities for folks that other WMAs offer. However, shooting sports and dog trials take precedent on these areas. So you could see some different season frameworks and whatnot, or that you would see on a normal WMA. And last, I'm not sure how well that's going to show up for you, but there's a map in your packet as well. This just illustrates how they're spread across the landscape there. The green H, that's the high level. The blue M is going to be your moderate, and your small yellow L will be low. And then in the east, there's I think it's an elk graphic that shows where our current hunter access agreements are.
I guess one comment I would have is you need to put an H in the east because we're the only place that doesn't have one.
Yeah. I wondered if you'd pick up on that.
What district is that purple? You got 4 or 5 of them there almost.
Yeah. And all kidding, I guess that would be one thing to try to have a little bit of each in all districts.
We certainly took that into consideration when we built this, and we tried to spread these as evenly across the state as we can.
Wildlife management area. The one you said mentioned in Berea, near Berea.
Miller Welch Central, yes.
Yes. They do have dove shoots out there, don't they?
Absolutely.
And there's 3 ponds out there. How often do they stock those areas?
Dave, can you speak to that? I'm
not even familiar with the ponds on there, to be quite honest with Mr. Farrell. I'd have to check and see. We may stock catfish on those ponds, but I'll have to check with you on that.
Also, they're so deep. 2 of them are so deep, so far back in there, and they have a no driving beyond this point. Is that to keep people with people that have disabilities? They can't. No way they can get back in there.
what is the reason for not being able to drive back there? Is because those properties are leased? Or
Yeah, so
Has that Ben speak to that?
unless
part of
it's
access.
and we have designated mobility impaired areas on many of our WMAs, and that's something we can certainly look into, at your discretion on any of our areas. But if there's not a designated mobility impaired access, we limit vehicular traffic on all of our areas, mainly so it doesn't disrupt other user groups. Now, if that became an active through fisheries, if that became an active, just as an example, a Finn's Lake or something like that, we would look at possibly changing access. But we have several WMAs with ponds and other things like that require walking to get to them right now.
Require walking.
Just so it doesn't, like I said, so it doesn't disrupt other uses or game.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Dave Griggs wants to point something out.
Go ahead, Mr. Driggs.
I will just say, Mr. Farrell, I am certain now, coming back to my memory banks, we do stock catfish at Miller Welch ponds. I don't know which of the three, but I certainly know we do stock catfish there. And I guess also just mention that just because we don't stock it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not a good fishery there. So I'd have to defer to check with staff to see what the quality is on those ponds. But certainly, most ponds, small lakes, we don't stock with bass and bluegill and whatnot.
Right. You guys did a great job at the at Whitehall, the Finn's Lake at Whitehall. I was there last week, and they caught tons of fish there, and the kids really enjoyed it. They were able to catch something, and when you have a kid fishing their first time there and they're catching fish, that gets them started, gets them hooked, and they really have a good time. They enjoy it. Father and son thing, they really look out for that. Yeah, good job on that one.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Morgan.
Well, first, I'd like to commend Ben. He's done an excellent job on categorizing. We're not using the term tiering anymore. Categorizing our WMAs. There's been a lot of discussion in the WMA working group about this. A lot of work went on, and this is something everybody wanted to see, and where it would be on our website where a person could go and look and see where to go and what was available when he got there. And you've done a really good job.
I appreciate it. I can't take all the credit. We've had a wonderful team of staff working on this. And I do want to clarify one point. I've heard some concerns, some rumors over this is an attempt to divest of public lands, things like that. That's absolutely not true. I think we would like to increase our public lands, if at all possible. And I've also heard some discussion or some complaints that this is an attempt to not evenly manage our areas and evenly spread resources. Well, that's accurate. I mean, we've never managed all 86 of our WMAs the same way because we don't have the resources to do that. So this really solidifies that and sets the expectations of what you're going to see when you go out on a property.
Thank you, Ben. That, like the others, have been greatly informational for. What a great update. I guess the last of those informational updates is wetland and stream mitigation, the FELO program. Rob Lewis, I guess you're going to present that first, right?
Appreciate it, but I'm probably not as loud as everybody else.
And Rob, if you want to, are you able to see if you sit, or do you know your
I mean, I can.
see it on the
I've got here some notes just so I stay with the high points. So if it's better for me to sit down, I can.
Sound may come through better if you're sitting around.
Well, I'll sit down. That way everybody can see everybody. Thank you all for letting us present kind of a refresher of the wetland stream mitigation program to you today. For some of you, this may be for the first time, so I will say it's kind of a complicated program, and there's a lot of misinformation sometimes or misunderstandings about it. And I just want to give you some basics today, and certainly if there's any questions, come to us, Deputy Commissioner, Fisheries Division Director Dave Dreves. We will all work to help clarify and make sure everybody is comfortable with anything that comes to them. And as I go through this, if you have questions, we're happy to dig in. So I'll move ahead. I guess around the house, I'll start by saying we call this the FELO program, and that's misunderstood quite a bit, but really the full technical name of the program is Wetland and Stream Fees in Lieu of Mitigation Program. And that just comes from its birth with the Clean Water Act and our mission to accept fees by the sale of credits for developers or permittees with the Clean Water Act to fulfill their needs. And we can accept those fees and implement good stream and wetland restoration mitigation projects. So simply put, we restore impaired streams and wetlands, and that offsets those impacts from developers elsewhere. Like you might expect, the guys building Walmart may not be very good at building a stream or a wetland, and they certainly don't want to stop building Walmart to build that stream and wetland. And so that's just kind of a gross example, but everything we do and all of the funds are overseen by the Corps of Engineers. And all of the decisions about, as far as like a project site, it goes through what we call an interagency review team. That includes the Corps of Engineers, this agency, the EPA, Kentucky Division of Water, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and in some cases some other large agencies, but it's a big interagency review team that pretty much everything that the program undergoes, all its use of funding is overseen by those groups, primarily the Corps of Engineers. In this state, we have 3 core districts, mostly the Louisville district, the southern part of the state's the the Nashville district, and then far out west, there's a little piece of Memphis. So the FELO program, it covers the entire state now, and we separate the state into 11 service areas. And very important thing to note about this is that these fees collected within a service area get implemented within that service area. So all project funds stay as close as they can to those impact areas. Certainly we don't use funds collected in Big Sandy in the salt service area and vice versa. So that's something that a lot of times there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding about that. So in a sense, you can think of it as one program is really kind of like 11 programs. And within that, we don't mix stream and wetland funds. So that'd be 22 programs. Obviously we don't run it that way, but we definitely delineate the funds that way. So something to note, and this is just real quick, any fee paid into us gets distributed in this manner. We take a range of 10 to 20% of that fee, helps administer the fund. 10% will serve as a contingency. It financially assures the projects that we're doing, and it also funds our long-term management. But the bulk of the fees go directly to projects. And also want to add here, very important, as you saw with Lisa's presentation about the budget, the budget, the total cash balance of the FELO program is very large. This does not represent that exactly. That's just how the fees are distributed. The cash balance that you see includes all of these things, and the very important thing to note is that over 90% of project funds are already assigned to projects. They're just sitting there waiting to be spent on those projects, and we're either in the process of developing, acquisitions, and I'll get into a little bit later, or it could be design, permitting, construction, all these phases, and I'll explain that to you here in just a second. But there's not, even though there's a large fund balance, there's bills out there waiting to be paid, essentially.
So you're saying 90% of that balance is already collected?
90%, if you look at the budget, it's like $150 million, like 90% of that is spoken for. I'll move on the next slide here. So who pays in lieu fees? Really anybody. Anybody that's doing a project that will impact what we call jurisdictional streams or wetlands that are covered by that Clean Water Act. Since inception, about 50% of our fees have come from road construction, with the rest of those being any range of commercial, residential development. Utilities is another big one. Historically, mining was a significant percentage, but we really haven't had any recent mining, maybe in the last 5 years or more. No significant payments from mining. But really, anybody, anywhere in the state of Kentucky could be a potential user, so to speak. And as an example, you can imagine the amount of stream footage that a project like this would impact, and that's the very reason why we are a good partner with KYTC, who is a big driver of all the development in Kentucky. So that's a simple example there. Poignant example, kind of happening right now, is the proposed battery plant in Hardin County. You can see on the graphic, and I just pulled this off like a newspaper article already in publication. The darker areas on that aerial photograph are forested or wooded or not farmed, and those would be maybe a potential stream or a wetland, for example, like a corridor or setback that wasn't historically farmed. And obviously we can't see what's under the building graphic, but you know, that project right there will utilize, and has actually very recently utilized, this program. Kind of saying again, just to drive it home, the law is, with the Clean Water Act, that there's no net loss of aquatic habitat functions and services. And the way that works with us, and this is why we're getting back to the FELO or in lieu fee acronym, we accept funds and take on that responsibility to do that mitigation. So it's a very restricted use of funds, and we're very, very particular and have a lot of oversight with federal agencies about how those funds get implemented. But the purpose of that is that we provide that mitigation need to fulfill those federal regulatory requirements. And it's really all about balancing that and it is as timely as possible, which, you know, that kind of leads me to this. Timely is a relative term. In a lot of cases, these are very heavy construction projects and span many acres, many feet of stream or acres of wetland, and they're very similar in process to a highway project. This top row is the typical major milestones in a highway development process or highway construction, and at the bottom is ours. We have a couple of extra steps where we iterate quite a bit with the Corps of Engineers and IRT about the design of our projects. What does that really mean to the landscape? Making sure that we're increasing the ecological integrity of that particular site. And then we also have a required minimum 5, often 10 years of monitoring that we actively do. And you guys get involved with each and every one of them at that property acquisition stage. So you've seen them. They've been, and all of them that we've done, except the ones that haven't made it to you yet, but they all pass right on through that same step. One thing I would like to kind of reiterate is the full life of our projects is, if everything worked perfectly, it'd take 8 years to get all the way through that monitoring phase, at a minimum. And it never works perfectly. So we're really looking at 10 to 15 year lifespan on projects. So that is, when you look at that fund balance again, it takes 10 to 15 years to spend that 1 fee. So that kind of gives you a sense of why it looks so large, but yet we can say we've got projects, we're ready to do them, we just got to pay those bills. And what that means is a lot of contracting with contractors and designers and various consultants along the way for every little bit and piece. Because even though we're doing habitat improvement, our projects go through the same NEPA process that any construction project may. So we're doing all of that along the way. So that's a big reason why you see such a big balance sometimes. So anyway, just kind of add to that. The big step, and this is one that you all are a part of here, is every FELO project, every mitigation project really requires permanent legal protection. And we can do projects on private lands, we can do projects on public lands, but we have to have that permanent protection. Mitigation projects do not have to become WMAs, but they can. And that's what makes the department such a nice place for a program like this, is because we have that sort of unified mission that we can protect and manage these properties. Now, how we would play into like something like what Ben just showed y'all about the categorizing of WMAs. Some cases it might be that high level of management, something like Veterans Memorial in Scott County. We had 50% of the land there was a mitigation project. And so that's probably a high management WMA. But then I've got a picture of an aerial one later where it would be low, where it's just a big preservation project. It's really passive access, but it's a great place to go. So just an example of these projects can kind of full range, full gamut of opportunity for the fishers and hunters and other outdoor recreation. So here's an example, like you guys might be familiar with, this aerial photo looking down on a pretty good sized farm in Bath County. The red lines are property and access corridors. The blue lines are streams that are out there, and then that yellow sort of kind of looks like a snake is one of our projects, and that's an easement corridor around a pretty good sized stream. And it's about 150 feet wide depending on where you are along the way. But that's pretty typical of an easement style project. Now we're not limited to that. We can put much more of an area into an easement, and recently we've had a couple of landowners be interested in like their whole watershed. And so they'll put whole watersheds of their farm into an easement, and we can utilize that as a mitigation project. And so here's, like I spoke to before, another example where we were able to purchase this property. This one started probably 12 to 15 years ago, even before I started with the program in 2009, where the original purchase was about 650 acres in Elliott County of all preservation. It's gorge-like, it's beautiful. And there's road access to that. As you can see, the blue line kind of down through the middle of that there is a stream where the department stocks trout. You can go fish trout there today, and we were there a few weeks ago, and the trout were kind of stacking up on a culvert. It was really neat to see, but it's a beautiful area. Yes, sir.
Concrete bridge. Been there.
Yeah, it's very nice. But also note that since that original purchase, we've doubled the acreage of that WMA with more preservation and restoration projects to this program, so that we're probably up in the 1,300 acres, and just finished or in the process of finishing up that construction there. And the next component will be improving some access points. So there'll be better parking, maybe more access down into the prettier versions of it. But that's been a very successful, very really nice project for both us and the department. But this might be an example of sort of a low category WMA where it's more passive. There's not open field out there in any great deal, but a nice area to go nonetheless.
Yeah, Rob, that kind of reminds me of like back when I used to supervise some public lands. We had an area in Nelson County, the John C. Williams WMA. We would have inquiries from people wondering why we didn't plant millet in the wetlands and things like that. Well, those were FELO or mitigation sites that transportation may have done mitigation work on. They couldn't do that cultivation and planting and all that because it's permanently protected, but it was also during that monitoring phase when you couldn't do any active management on it, period.
Right, exactly. And it's a little hard for some people to really understand, but when we do the restoration part of the project, the mitigation of something that's existing condition is poor, the intent there is that we're kind of setting it to be sustainable by nature, not by us. And so in the short term, it looks like a lot's going on. And for a few years, it may be a great place for, say, like turkey hunting or open field, that kind of thing, because it's kind of going through that prairie early development phase. But its intention is that it becomes forested and it just kind of takes care of itself as a natural area. Just a kind of a zero in on one. This is that St. Bath County project, and you can see this is a before and after, so pretty clear. But the intent here is to show that, a lot of these projects are addressing one of Kentucky's, if not the number one pollutant to our open water, which is siltation, sedimentation, just pure erosion. And we take care of that. And So, I mean, all of our projects are fully funded by Philo. So, I mean, we can work with the department, but we don't mix our funds. Like, the department doesn't fund any of this restoration. It's all the Philo funds specifically. In this case, we were able to put in some nice crossings for the landowner on a pretty big stream. That's probably I think that's probably a 30, maybe 35 square mile point in that stream. Now, these are kind of big for Philo. We often are doing much smaller drainage areas, smaller streams, even up into the ephemeral watersheds where it only flows, short periods of time during rain and things like that. But every now and then we get to get down into a nice fishery like this, and it's kind of a treat.
Is that what you did at Veterans Park?
Veterans, yeah, there's nothing really big at Veterans. Like, you're not wading out there necessarily. I mean, those are really small, barely perennial streams. I think there's only a couple of the drainages that maybe just one that supports fish, and then be really small fish at that. But that all of the stream corridors on Veterans are part of the mitigation project one way or the other.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Mr. Moore, go ahead, sir.
I would like to say, Philo does an excellent job, and there's a lot of good news around the Philo, a lot of it. And not only does it do a lot of habitat, it makes a tremendous economic impact in some of these places, especially the local places. And you can watch these commissioners as you went through this. You had their attention. And the reason why we requested this report is so they can use this report and go back to their district and mentor with their stakeholders and go to their clubs and go to their county officials and talk to them about these projects. And I commend you on bringing this report to us.
Appreciate it.
This is a good report. I went through it pretty good. It's a good report, and I would encourage you to come back and do it periodically.
We hope to be back. Certainly actually the last two annual reports are up on the Philo webpage portion of the department's website now. So if you wanted to get down into the kind of the dirty details of it, then it's all there for you, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Well, I thank you for doing it, and it's a good job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Lewis? Mr. Lewis, thank you for your time and for your efforts.
Thank you all.
I think Doug has made that perfectly clear. Our next agenda item is public comments. Mr. Kelly.
Chairman, thank you. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and give kind of an overview of our public comment process and how we accept those, and then go into, we did have a couple comments and then one attendee who signed up to comment as well. And I don't know if he's still here or not. So the Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Commission welcomes public input on proposed regulation changes. Public comments on discussion items or new business items may be submitted by email to fw.publicaffairs@ky.gov until 5 p.m. Eastern the day preceding the meeting. There are no new business items on today's agenda. Commenters should include commission meeting in their email subject line and include their first and last name, Kentucky county of residence or state of residence if a non-resident, and organizational affiliation and position if they are an officer or official representative for a particular organization. Emailed comments are distributed to all commission members prior to the meeting and read by staff during the commission meeting by department staff for up to 3 minutes total per commenter, time permitting, and at the discretion of the commission chair. A commenter's contact information is not required for emailed comments, but will be necessary if information is requested, and other than name and affiliation, it will not be publicly disclosed if provided. Anonymous comments are distributed to commission members, but may not be read during the meeting. The commission chair reserves the right to not read publicly any comments that are libelous, profane, derogatory of others, redundant, or not relevant to the meeting agenda. Questions will receive an email response. In-person attendees of meetings may also request to speak up to 3 minutes total per commenter on new business items or discussions items on the agenda, but must sign in on the public comment request form on the table at the meeting room entrance by 9 a.m. Eastern on the day of the meeting, and provide name, county, and state of residence, organization represented, and position if applicable, and applicable agenda items. Commenters who speak in person will not have their emailed comments read publicly at the meeting and are asked to avoid voicing comments that are redundant with others speaking prior to them during the allotted public comments time. So as I mentioned before, we did receive public comments. The meeting attendee who signed up to speak, and also one of the emailed comments pertain to an action item earlier in this meeting about the prohibition of use on aircraft for taking fish and wildlife. That agenda item, that action item was tabled. I don't know if you would like to entertain a comment on that item, since it'll be brought to the commission meeting next time.
Well, since we had it as a discussion item, if it's not, if it's not terribly long, I think it'd be okay to go ahead and hear it today, because that may sway the decision of the commissioner at the time that we put it as an action item.
Okay.
So I think it's okay to read it, if it'd be the will of the commission to go ahead and read that one too. We've got a few minutes.
Okay. Mr. Webb is here, but if he just happens to be out in the lobby and hears this.
He left. I checked and he was on the outside.
Okay. So this would be email comments from Todd Blevins, who's the Kentucky State Director of the Humane Society of the United States. And I'll try to get to his comment on this agenda item and also a discussion item. So I'll try to get to these within 3 minutes. On behalf of the Humane Society of the United States and our Kentucky supporters, we submit these comments in support of the proposal to prohibit the use of aircraft, i.e. drones, helicopters, etc., in hunting, fishing, trapping, spotting, locating, or reporting location of, harassing, taking, transporting, killing of fish and wildlife. We also respectfully oppose the proposal to create non-resident bear chase permits and urge the Commission to reject that change. On the use of drones and other aircraft, it stacks the deck unfairly against wildlife and have no place in Kentucky. Using drones to scout and find game animals to relay locations back to a hunter flies in the face of fair chase, a core principle of hunting ethics. Drones and other aircraft give hunters an extreme advantage over those using more traditional methods. Furthermore, the use of drones and other aircraft could also negatively impact wildlife populations. When wildlife biologists determined bag limits and acceptable numbers of licenses to sell, they did so with traditional hunting methods and standard success rates in mind. Because the sporting element is diminished so greatly with the use of drones and other aircraft, hunter success can increase dramatically. Although the use of drones while hunting in Kentucky may not be an immediate problem, this proposal is a proactive step in the right direction. States are increasingly moving towards banning this unsporting killing method, and the use of drones in hunting has garnered strong opposition. Various stakeholders oppose the use of drones and other aircraft, including animal welfare proponents, as well as sportsmen's organizations, such as Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, who work to pass bans in various states, as well as the Pope and Young Club and Orion, the Hunters Institute. It's critical that Kentucky take the necessary step of prohibiting the use of drones and other aircraft for the purpose of taking or aiding in the take of wildlife to preserve the notion of fair chase. Failure to do so would erode the public's trust in ethical state wildlife management. We respectfully request the Commission to adopt this proposal. And the comment on the second comment from Mr. Blevins, allowing non-residents to obtain bear chase permits expands extremely unsporting and harmful practices upon Kentucky's small bear population. And this is a rather lengthy comment.
We were worried about the 2-minute mark.
Okay. And Commission members have been provided these email comments, just for the record. Kentucky's own black bear biologist suggests that the bear populations be monitored, hunting levels limited, poaching stopped, and females protected. Yet in the last 5 years alone, the number of black bears killed in Kentucky each year has increased by 172.5%. Kentucky black bears need more, not fewer, conservation measures to protect them. past determined that Kentucky's black bears consist of two primary populations. One is located on the Cumberland Plateau and is related to bears in West Virginia and Virginia. A separate population is found at the Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area and is directly related to bears in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, from where they had been trapped and then transported. Murphy et al. Believe that the Big South Fork, Kentucky population contains about 21 males and 17 females for a total population of 38, with an estimated 35 breeding animals. Murphy et al. Suggests that this bear population, while genetically limited, is sustainable for now. However, in the same study, bear biologists suggest that this population be monitored using non-invasive techniques and that this population should be protected from high harvest rates and illegal kills. The Eastern Kentucky bear population is larger than the one at the Big South Fork, with approximately 310 bears. This population, too, has genetic problems because it experiences relatively low gene flow necessary to ensure population vitality. Kentucky's two black bear populations are still small, and two factors could harm them. One, habitat fragmentation and loss, and two, hunting and poaching. At least 24 bears have been poached in the past 2 decades.
Mr. Keller, let me interrupt you. It has now been just over 4 minutes. We are trying to confine these statements to 3 minutes or less because sometimes we'll have a large volume of them. I want the record to show that all the commission members will have a copy of his comments. So even though we're going to suspend any further reading of that because he's at 4 minutes instead of the 3 minute mark, let the record show that all the commission members will have a copy of that and be able to read it prior to making a decision concerning that bear issue and the drone issue. So they'll have that to be able to help make that issue. So thank you with that one. Do you have another one other than that?
That is all.
Okay. So the person who wanted to make a comment, do you know what the topic was that he wanted to make a comment about?
It was on drone use.
On the use of drone? Mm-hmm. My suggestion would be if you have a contact for him, you might ask him to directly email his comment to the commissioners at our Fish and Wildlife email addresses so they can look at that prior to making a decision concerning drone use. If you don't care to get in touch with him and supply him with the email addresses of all the commission members.
Okay, we'll do that.
He already got mine.
Sir?
He already has mine, I do believe.
Oh, okay, good. So that should conclude our informational update as well as the discussion items that we had. So all we have left, if we have no more public comments, is adjournment.
I have one comment I would like to make. And I'd like to make this comment to our TV audience or the folks listening on Facebook Live. My friends over at the state legislature assure me that it's not always easy to watch sausage and the law being made. And I think you can see today that extends to wildlife policy, especially in our discussion about fall turkey season. What I would like to say is that my fervent hope is that our stakeholders will look beyond our lack of coordination and see the sincerity of the commission here in trying to follow process and to get it right for our wildlife and for our sportsmen and our sportswomen. So thank you very much for your patience in watching us.
Thank you, sir. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So make a motion.
I have a motion from Mr. Swallows and a second by Mr. Horn. Any further discussion? If not, I'll take a verbal vote. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. Opposed, no. Meeting adjourned.